May the words of my mouth and the meditation of mine heart be acceptable in Yahweh's sight. He is our strength and our Redeemer, and it is in His name, which is His authority, that we pray, praise, proclaim, project, and protect today's message. Aman. Welcome to everybody. Thank you for being on with us. We appreciate you. Um, Welcome. Namaste. Ni hao. Masayo. Masayo. Ohio. Kamsa. Kasamida. Akwa Aba. Etesen. Jambo. Abari Mimini Kofi. Nina Fraku Kutana de Wewe. Hola, mi nombre es Kofi. ¿Cómo está? Josh, je m'appelle Kofi. Ça va? Kwam Yashdel. Shalom. Shalom Shai Shai. Anai Kofi. Mashalom Chi. Barak Allah Atsham Yechava. May the blessings be upon thee in the name of Yechava. We're grateful and thankful to be in front of you all again. I'm Pastor Kofi, Pastor Servant to Christ, where we are always changing lives one mind at a time, but being a voice of the voiceless and speaking the unspoken. And thank you to everybody for being on. We give all praise and honor once again to the Most High, Yahweh Elohim. We give all praise and honor to Him for my wife, the Honorable Maya, who lives a life that's able to be honored. You can check her out on TikTok, YouTube, her website, and Pinterest at Bloom and Flourish. Not A&D, the letter N, Bloom and Flourish. She is a healer, herbalist, chemist, and biologist by degree. You can check out what she's doing for the diaspora, especially with her tinctures, which are just natural medicines that she makes by her hand, even just going out and foraging for items. And the tincture for this month is dealing with anxiety. So if you'd like to be able to get that tincture amongst many others, feel free to let us know. And we're thankful and grateful for you helping her with her mission, just to make sure that the health of the diaspora is a calling that she takes care of in that mission that she submitted to. To everybody, the moderators, ministerial staff, to SOC, to those who agree with us, disagree with us, if you're part of the diaspora, if you're somebody who's grafted in, if you're somebody who's hearing us for the first time, if this is one time of many, we appreciate your presence today. And thank you for being on the podcast, YouTube, TikTok, and those who will join us on Facebook later on. We appreciate you all. So thank you so much. We'll say hello to everybody. We're going to continue this Code Breaker series, but thank you to everybody who's on. We appreciate you so very much. How you doing? Always blessed. How you doing, Keith? How you doing, Fanny? Lionhearts, always blessed. Big Brother Thomas, Minister Joseph, Sheila. How you doing? Is it Carrie Tubman? Nay, Carrie, Sweet Treats, Minister Shantae, Sister Sharice, All I Am, Elion. Okay, he came up to FYP. All right, how you doing, Jay? Hello, is it Gai? I don't even know how to say it. Gai Dial Zobair. No, I'm not a god. I don't worship God. God is a Germanic deity where you can make it to be whatever you want. So I am not somebody who made myself into any kind of deity or spirit or thing like that, although I am a spirit, right? But I am not the Most High. But thank you for being on. If that's your way of saying hello, I guess hello to you. Whether you're a god or not, or you claim that you already know what I'm going to speak about, we would at least hope that we could greet each other as human beings. So hello, how are you doing? Hopefully you're doing well. How you doing, Marlene? I'm sorry, I'm trying to get this thing set up. All right. But thank you guys so much. We're going to continue with this Code Breaker series. And today we're going to talk about the time code. Right, in the Code Breaker series, how do we break the code? How do we learn the code? How do we speak the code? How do we write the code? How do we recognize what the code is? How you doing, Market Sheriff? Where there's a time code. And Bakwatav to all, once again, Grand Rising and Bakwatav, or some people say Bokratav, but Bakwatav literally meaning that we are excited and grateful that before even the rising of the sun, that the Most High has already decided that you will be blessed in all areas. How you doing, Sister Tracy? So we're excited and thankful to come to you guys again tomorrow. So today is Friday, so it's the first Friday of the month. We're hoping that you're able to go out and bless somebody in your communities, whatever you do. We don't need you to check in with us and let us know, but as a group, we try to make sure that on this day, each month, we go out and be a blessing to somebody. Tomorrow, we're going to finish up our watching Reclaiming the Throne. We got about 25 minutes left. And then after that, we'll have discussion for our SOC meeting. So we look forward to that. And before that, we'll have our Shabbat Shalom service on the Kofi Ofori podcast. So those of you who are listening on this podcast, you want to join us. If you want to join us live, my wife and I will be live on the podcast together, 10 a.m. Eastern, New York time tomorrow. We're excited about that and grateful for that opportunity. So thank you to everybody for being on. We appreciate you. Trying to make sure I get some water before we get started. Got a bunch of water to start with today. Hello, Lynette. How you doing? Sister Dawn. How you doing, Jason? All right, so we're going to start with what, or we're going to talk about what today. We're in the middle of our code breaker series, and today we're going to talk about the time code. How you doing, Sir Stephen? The time code. Is there a timing? Is there something that we can look at as far as his story or even our story as far as a timeline? And yes, we know that we can exist in and out of time. We know that we are greater than time. Eternity is greater than time. Time fits into eternity. However, is there some, as stewards of time, it's interesting that we don't necessarily even do this, but we talk about being on time or being stewards of time or making sure we're on time, or that was an on time message, an on time word. Don't waste my time, all these things, but we don't keep up with the story of time very well. And we've been taught that we shouldn't. And those who don't know where they come from, even on the timeline, right, will not know who they are going forward on the timeline. Those who don't know who they are within a blip on the radar of eternity called time will not be able to comprehend who they are in eternity. Those who do not know where they come from, as far as where their people are, what their language they speak, things of that nature, then of course they will have a problem with even knowing what to do with their time. If we don't know what others did with their time or did in their time, how in the world can we apply it to what we're doing now and what we're doing going on? For what we do now, we would call that purpose. What we see we're going into is called vision. And so how do we value it if we don't even know what made this time valuable, right? That really is a great launching point and starting point for us. How you doing, Benjamin? Thanks for being part of the community. Dwayne and CT for it. Thank you for the love. Appreciate it. So if we don't comprehend where we come from in time, how you doing, Jeremy? If we don't comprehend what happened in time, then we don't have a proper timeline. How you doing, Sister Deborah? And thanks for being part of the community, Davina. So if we don't recognize what's going on in time, right, there's this code that we're trying to break, and part of the code is the time code, right? How do we figure out who we are, what's happened, what kind of system we're in, if we don't know what happened systemically and systematically, and what's still happening systemically today, right? Thanks for being part of the community, Tina. So we have to realize that if we're going to talk about the time, right, the timeline, the code, we have to figure out what's coded. Where certain words changed, like peep game, roll with me, where certain words changed in time, so that you see a word and don't recognize who or what or where that was in time, in context. Remember, we're not about, and hello, Brother Alton, if I didn't say so already. Remember, we're not about context without facts. We're not about facts without context. We want to be contextually factual, even in time. So is it possible, and how you doing, Henry? Is it possible that when I read this, somebody in time could have changed what this was to something different? And if so, do I have enough of the code to recognize even the time code? Right? Is it possible that before there was a such thing as God, there was something else? Right? Is it possible? I believe that it obviously is when you do some research. But once again, could it be possible that in time somebody took the very thing that people say that this country is built off of? If you don't believe so, if you're going to go in front of court, you're going to do this. Put your hand on this, and you're going to swear upon this. You have a system, whether you believe in this or not, that's supposedly built upon this, right? 2 or 3 witnesses, 3 branches that come together to supposedly work as one. God bless America, things like that. But in time, are there some things that we need to be aware of that have been changed? Right? The answer lies with the question, right? Exactly. So when we ask the right question, which we've been taught, even in your churches, even in your synagogues, even sometimes in your mosque, sometimes in your Buddhist temples, sometimes even in your personal study, you're afraid to question, because we have this Nicolaitan spirit that says that you're supposed to be conquered. But if this says you're supposed to be more than conquerors, we have to ask what happened in time to have us become a group of people who are okay with living in Stockholm syndrome, or a group of people who are not more than conquerors. If we have become conquered, then we have to ask ourselves what happened to make us conquered. And how you doing? My wife is on The Honorable Mind. Thanks for being on, babe. You can check out my wife on TikTok, YouTube, or website, and Pinterest at Bloom and Flourish, not A-N-D, the letter N, Bloom and Flourish. She is a healer, herbalist, chemist, and biologist by degree. My mom, right? And thank you so much. I appreciate the love. Thank you so much for the person who gave it. So we have to ask ourselves what happened, right? We have to ask ourselves what happened to where people want us to believe it is okay for us to be conquered, right? We have to ask ourselves what happened even as far as the curse, because if once again we're trying to become code breakers, that we might become curse breakers. I have to break the curse off me, so I have to figure out what the code is to break the curse, right? If your computer is starting to go down and it's about to crash, you have to deal with coding. Yes, you might deal with the app or the application or how to apply something, but it's going to be code that gets the computer back on track. All of the melanin and all of the crystals and everything that's in these computer chips are going to do what? They're going to make sure that they go back to a code. It is a code that links it up, right? A bunch of zeros, infinities, and ones, right? Which the Most High is one, holy, are going to come together to be able to make sure that your computer works, because it can't work outside of infinity or the one who created infinity or the one who is infinity or the one who created time. So here we are again dealing with the time code. Have I broken all the curses? I've broken many. And there's many more to break every day. I'm trying to crucify the flesh. So we're working together once again in the time code. First in the mind, can we relate in time? In time, can we relate? Can we get something in time? So can we look at certain things that were altered? Can we so let us start with some stuff in time, right? How you doing, LeBron? So let us start once again in time. In order to get an on time word, we must be able to deal in time. Right? In order to get an on time word, we must even deal in time. And a lot of us don't know how things have worked on the timeline. So on the timeline, question, where does the word Negro come from? See, we have arguments even within our own community. We got to come to that one before we deal with the zero, the infinite. Can we deal with the one truth? Can we make the main thing the main thing? So before we say we're going to have the Moorish ideal be first, or the Israelite ideal be first, or the African ideal be first, or the diaspora be first, where is the Negro? Right, the most ancient form, one of the most ancient forms of calling somebody from Africa or identifying with certain African tribes is going to West Africa. The Negro. Before Negro became something that was looked at as bad, or even in law nowadays is considered to be a fake person, you should never on paper ever declare yourself to be Negro, colored, Black, or African American as far as Western law is concerned, because that actually means that you are a fake person in this corporation called the United States. Like, that's something you can literally look up in a law dictionary and Black's Law Dictionary, and that does not mean a Black person's dictionary. The person who wrote its last name is Black. So go look up Black's Law Dictionary. Is the greatest tool that people use in law still to this day. All right, there's 11 editions, I believe, and you want to make sure that you recognize as many of those editions as possible and begin to read them, because once again, we stay away from law, or we stay away from the code. And since we don't know how the code works, we don't know what's going on. So when you go to a courtroom and you start identifying as African American, Black, etc., or back in the day when you said that you were Negro or colored, they looked at you and they said, "Oh, okay, this is a fake person." They already don't recognize what's going on. How you doing, Sonny? And thanks for being part of the community. Is it Amir the God? Amir the Goddess, or Amir? I'm not sure how you pronounce it. So if we deal with these things properly, we have to say, well, did they change the code? So once again, did they change in the timeline? Why is it that we don't know that Negro or Negro is one of the most ancient ways you can identify a group of people in West Africa? How you doing, Shikashay? Think about that. They never told us. They changed the code. So we started to believe that Negro was a free slave, but we don't realize the timeline that got us there. And out of Negro, then they started saying that they were in the late 70s and 80s that they were an African American. Yeah, or even, well, if we go even to Negrito, not only is that dealing with little Negroes, but also literally, if you go to the Philippines, the original people in the Philippines are even listed as Negrito. They are small black people, right? So we have to acknowledge that something is off. Yeah, right. Yeah, they don't want to identify. So we're going to get there in a second, such systematic, but exactly, you can see where we're headed, right? Because you have some knowledge on this. So you have to know, right? We should all know our stuff, right? So we have to know. Know means to be intimate with, right? We have to be intimate with. And how you doing, Minister Sonia? We have to be intimate with these things. Do you know? Are you intimate with this? Are you intimate with what a Negro is, right? Are you intimate with when they came to West Africa to enslave those West Africans? They came to a place that they had already marked off on a map and had renamed. They called the lower part of West Africa Guinea, and the upper part of West Africa, they called it Negro land. So they knew who you were. Now, interestingly enough, when you get to we talked about this last night. This is why we kind of started dealing in this last night, right? We started getting to a place to where we were making a point to show you through those books and things that we declared and we showed you to read. I'll bring up a couple of them if you just want to go ahead and try to research them or look them up or read them on your own time. We talked about them a little bit, not really in depth, but just to kind of give you a heads up on what some of these things talked about. So we talked about some of this stuff, like we talked about the Spanish Inquisition, and we talked about this book, The Jews, the study of race and environment, written by Maurice Fishberg. Right, and that's a book that goes back to, that's a book that's telling you the story of what these Jews look like. In this book, he talks about them being swarthy and looking like Africans, and then we went to another book. This is a really, really, really long title: Memoirs of the Secret Services of John Mackey, Esquire, during the reigns of King William, Queen Anne, King George I, published from original manuscript as attested by his son, Spring Mackey, Esquire, right? So his son published what his father had wrote out, his memoirs about his life, and his father talks about, hey, I came across this man who had this wealth and had this knowledge and had all this stuff. He says he describes him as tall and slim and being swarthy or black, just like a Jew would be, or just like somebody from West Africa would be. Okay, right? This is just stuff we can read, right? Or what about in travels in the United Provinces, England, Scotland, and Ireland? This is 1634, 1635. So right around the corner from 1619, right? It's called Travels in, I'm sorry, I can't read it on my thing. Travels in Poland, the United States provinces, England, Scotland, and Ireland, right? In 1634, 1635. So when he traveled, this person traveled to these places, right? Here's your author, right? When he, William, what is it, Brereton, and when he traveled to these places, he said specifically that when I went to these places, I saw that these people were Jews who came from these places. They were people who were swarthy. Matter of fact, he even talks about in this book as well, dealing with the people from Amsterdam. And he says that the black Jews in Amsterdam had curly hair and they resembled people that live over in what we would call the land of Canaan. Right. And he said and he would describe them the same way that ancient people describe the people from the land of Canaan. Right. And we even talked about this quote, right? That literally he's talking about even their men were most black and full of hair. And talks about that their women had to be dogged and other things. Right. There's receipts. Even this man, I still can't remember exactly which university Samuel C. Bartlett is from, but this is somebody who was over university and taught about Israelite culture. And this is somebody who existed in what we would call modern times. And he wrote a book called The Source of History in the Pentateuch, or Pentateuch, depending on how you pronounce it. And he wrote many other books, gave many lectures. And he said that the black people, or that the Jews of Spain and Portugal resemble black people from West Africa and from the Sea of Reeds and even the Red Sea. Okay, right. So in the timeline, if we know that there was a Inquisition, and if you read further into some of these books, you'll find out that the Inquisition was a lot of people who were there were Jews who were forced into slavery, and they had to give up. They had outright give up their belief systems. That happens around the colonial or social constructs of white people who attacked other white people. Stuff happened as far as chattel slavery becoming big business before the slave trade started in the triangular slave trade. It first starts with the Spanish Inquisition in Spain, the Portuguese Inquisition in Portugal, meaning it's not really even the Spanish Inquisition, it was the Roman Catholic Inquisition. It was first the Roman Catholic Inquisition. Remember, I told you what's the most ancient way of dealing with or name that we can find for some of the tribes or what they were known as by others, Carthaginians who were Phoenicians, we know, but they were really Phoenicians. Those Phoenicians, they said that they are from what? Canaan, right? Canaan is about those people. Even the word Hebrew or peculiar people, and even it uses that term in the Bible, get over to West Africa. So for quite a long time, right? For quite a long time. And guess what they called Queen Isabella to send Christopher Columbus in 1491, chapter 13, first interpreter, even that hard to get, because he had been sailing and West Africa, at least knowledge of it. But these people knew what they were doing. See, when people keep saying it was just a product of the times, that's time code. How you doing, Justin? How you doing, Peaches? Thanks for being on today. How you doing, Jason? You're the Roman Catholic whitewash it all in Constantine combined paganism. Well, yeah, but even after Constantine, and by the way, Constantine is not the end all be all, because then we got to talk about Justinian and Theodora, right? That's when we get to right on the time, but really didn't say much. He just whatever the other people came up with, he made it law, right? So he's the first person to push for Christianity across the Roman Catholic Church. And all that time frame and everything, that's Hebrews, or what they would even call Jews, even though they didn't really use that term yet because there was no letter J yet. But what they really called what these people looked like, who they were enslaved, and they also looking like Jews and looking like, there goes well, right? So this is how they're described. This is how these people are described. Thank you for that. From Columbus' son, from what we look like in England and in Ireland and in France and in Amsterdam. If we have those who are Dominicano and those who are Haitian in that area, and Cubano as well, and only when he comes over, he's surprised because when we say, "Oh yeah, we already know about people from West Africa. We already speak a dialect like y'all thought we would." He says they even tell him we have guanine weapons, and if you look up guanine weapons, they are West African weapons. Something's interesting. It's our pleasure. All the same. He said, that's interesting because I know about these guanine weapons, but there's no way. And they found out that, yes, the Mecca the same, percentage-wise of the metals and everything, down to the way it was tied. And when they started enslaving these people, guess what they called them, right? Because some of these people even ran back over, initially even Library of Congress keeps a map of Negro land. And so those people who went back to Negro, when they started that, they were focusing on the time code. Would it be some Jews, or what we would say is Avla, or he have Negro bloods, and all these Africans that they started making slavery about skin color, right? Because they were looking for those Pacific tribes, and they were like, well, you guys are black too, and you guys are black too, and became more. You're a Negro. It's Law Dictionary. There's two definitions. Is an American. So when you hear, but also anybody in the Americas who was copper color was considered to be an American. So when they enslaved indigenous Americans, they enslaved Negroes by their law, by their standard. By their law. Once again, the time code, we see that through whatever, maybe in the late 1800s even. But no, a Negro was originally a West African who the Bible declares came over when they started enslaving them, after they started enslaving Negroes or Jews who were in Europe. They went for the ones that ran away, and they started in a place they would eventually call Negro land. And on the map of Negro land, you have the Bread Coast, you have the Gold Coast, you have the Ivory Coast, and you have the Slave Coast. Now, here's something interesting, though. You think that the term ivory refers, but do you know why it was with the elephant? You see this? You see why they say that? See, we got to get the time code. Why do they say that the ivory comes from this African elephant? Why? Right? Why? Well, we just talked about what the Negro word Negro originally meant. Now, Negro nowadays is a bad word because they don't like Negroes. They enslave Negroes, right? But Negro wasn't always a bad term, especially when the Negroes had power and were in power, right? But once again, do you know why ivory? See, we think ivory is there, but see, in the Ivory Coast, there were a group of people who had some stuff that was out of ivory, but it wasn't necessarily, they weren't, it was, see, if you go over to, if you've ever been over in that area, they don't really have elephants over in that area. There's really not any elephants over there. If you ever go over to the area, I've been there, done that, right? There's no elephants in that area. So how do you get a place where there's no elephants, but you call it the Ivory Coast? So you think it's the Ivory Coast because they changed the code, they changed the language, right? Also can be a type of tree identified with a people. How you doing, Sister Shima? How you doing? Right? Read their history of what they ended up calling themselves because of being enslaved, right? Or dealing with people who call them something different. You'll find something interesting that happened. There's a group of people that many of us are familiar with. Matter of fact, many of them were transported over here. They are called Igbo people. Igbo people. Now, the Igbo, before that, Igbo, see, they didn't, because that's what others were calling them, but then they started calling themselves the Igbo people because of ruse. And so they tried to say Hebo. So Hebo became Igbo, which became Igbo. But before they were known as Igbo, they actually would have called themselves Ivrit, Ivrit. And when you research that, you'll discover, well, wait a minute, before they called themselves Ivrit, that came from something called Ivri, Ivri, because the people who came and were mixed and started mixing languages, having a different dialect, they were using a Hebrew term that is Avra. The other side I was talking about, it literally is what you get your word Hebrew from. So they were Avra, Ivri, Ivrit, Hebo, Igbo, Igbo, and they had no problem being Avra or Ivrit until somebody came and conquered them and told them, you're not who you say you are. Matter of fact, you are who you say you are, but we're coming to tell you that we actually are enslaving you now. See, here's the deal. So if we know this, if we can see what's going on, these people didn't come over because they didn't believe who you were. They came over because of a doctrine that you guys might not be familiar with, but a doctrine basically known as like the Hamitic doctrine, right? This Hamitic doctrine where people said that Ham was cursed, and somehow, some way, they tried to make that therefore, since Ham was cursed, all Africa deserves to be enslaved, and Shem married into Ham, so they deserve to be enslaved. Before they said they were you, they knew who you were, and so they used it as an excuse to be able to tap into the curse and say, hey, it says they're going to be taken away on ships, Deuteronomy 28. Right? It says that they're not going to be who they were told to be. This is written down, documented. We just showed you the books, right? This is written down, documentation. Some of the greatest, what they say, are the greatest minds in their theology. Some of the greatest minds in their geology. They knew who you were, and they literally used who you were as an excuse to be able to say, well, hey, they cursed anyways. We'll just go ahead and join in. Right? Because a Negro was, once again, one of the most ancient ways of saying what a West African was. They knew that these people were Israelites who had scattered already. They knew that when they scattered, and when Rome took over in 780 C, a lot of them had scattered to West Africa and North Africa and East and Central and South, of course, too, right? But I'm talking about specifically with that stuff on this timeline we're going on, the time code. They knew who you were. Right? They knew that you were scattered again after 1491 when the last great Moorish king was defeated. They knew who you were. So Christopher Columbus, when he went looking for you, so 1491, he went looking for, or they defeated us, right? They wanted to go after us and get slaves. They asked permission from the Pope that they could not only have slaves over after who they were going after, who they just defeated, but if they could go to the land of Asherah. Then in 1492, Christopher Columbus sails the ocean blue, right? After Christopher, right, and right after that, 1493, the doctrine of discovery becomes official. They had been using the doctrine of discovery since 1452, but had not made it official until they finally found these Negroes, these Israelites, these Hebrews, these Sephardic Jews, who, according to many books, are said to be people who were Black, black as the people of Africa, black as the people of Canaan, black as the people near the Sea of Reeds, black as the people near the Red Sea, black as the people who were Palestinian, all those things we just talked about. They went looking for you. And so when you hear somebody say, well, why is it that Africans sold Africans into slavery? Here's the part they don't tell you. If they're only looking for specific groups of people, if they are only looking for specific tribes. Yeah, exactly, right? They knew our story. And back then we knew our story too, right? But they were only looking for specific people. So they partnered with other people, right? Who, by the way, may not have seen the value yet in making sure that Africa was united all together as one diaspora. And they came looking for you. This isn't, people who are there, people who laugh, or people who don't notice. Once again, like, it's because you don't read. See, if you want to hide the truth, I used to think, because the saying used to go, if you want to hide something from a black person, just put it in a book. But see, I realized that most people don't read. So read up, and make sure that you get your stuff together. This is stuff written by people centuries before us, giving accounts of stuff way before us, like we just talked about, right? You got to open up and read. How you doing, Minister? And I said, a lot of people will not read. A lot of people will not study to see what are people saying about you. What are people saying about the slave trade, right? What are people even saying who are straight up KKK? Like, let's even look at your enemy. What are they saying about you, and if they know who you are? But because people don't know any better, people laugh at themselves a lot of times. Or some people are okay with what's happened to you, and so they could care less. You said African didn't like us because we were particular people. Some didn't. Some didn't know what was going to happen. But also, you got to realize, in tribes, when there was no being united, a lot of African people, whether you were Israel or not, a lot of African people just didn't mess with a lot of other African tribes that much. They didn't look at each other as being the same. They didn't look at each other in our humanity, and that's something that we messed up in as a culture, as a people. How you doing, She So Israel? Like, we have to admit those things. Well, once again, if you want help with anything as far as food or any of that, we keep saying that people reach out to us. We can have a conversation, and we'll see what we're able to do. And if we can raise something for you, whatever, let us know. But just reach out to us and have conversation, and we can talk some stuff through. And how you doing, aphrodisiac, right? So you have to get in a place and of a mindset and of a thought process to where there's a timeline and people change the code, right? So if you don't know any of that, you hear the word Negro. You hear what I'm saying? You hear the term Negro, and what do? You just say, oh, okay, Black people in the late 1800s, early 1900s, maybe to the mid 1900s. And that's kind of what I come out of. That's all you hear because it's coded. You don't think ancient West African. You don't think ancient Israelites. You don't think, hey, in the 1400s, they knew who we were and they went looking for us specifically to enslave. You don't think there's books written by theologians, including people who are into Yahwism, Yahwism, where they're looking for these people of Yah, and they kept researching and traveling the world, a lot of times even in Africa, to be able to say, like, oh, why are all these tribes that like say that they worship this person named Yah? Why do they, if they honor their elders, start calling them Yah Yah? Why they do? Like, people studied this stuff, right? So going back to what somebody was talking about earlier, Daniel chapter, when we're talking about this stuff and we're talking about Constantine, we don't look at Justinian. This is important on the timeline. It's our pleasure. Thank you. Right. And we'll try to get to Ezekiel if we can. Yes, I've read Ezekiel before. Matter of fact, we just did some stuff on Ezekiel not too long ago. Right. And we had those things recorded if you want to go to our YouTube page to be able to catch up on those things. So when you start talking about these things, people don't want to be honest about the fact that, wait a minute, Justinian is a huge piece. Now, we don't know emperors. We don't study emperors. You don't know Vespasian is who is dealing with the scattering in 70 AC. We don't know that Nero is the person that you have to be careful about with that name of a number in 603 score and 6 or 666. We don't know that that Caesar and that Augustus or people who literally change your calendar up and you live by them and you have them in your calendar. Don't even think about it. July, August, Julius Caesar and his son Augustus, right? We don't think about these things, right? We don't know. But see, we go straight to Constantine because that's low hanging fruit. And I get why we go there. There's truth to it. But Constantine is not the one you really, really got to pay attention to as far as the mixing of iron and clay. It started a little bit with that, but it was already starting. Even at the time of Yahshua, it was already starting, right? Cristianos was not a big deal, or what we call Christians was not a big deal until later on. Thank you for the love, appreciate it, right? But you got to look at Justinian. See, Justinian is crucial. So we don't know how the time code works. We don't know how our culture works. We don't know how to remember we were writing out our language. We don't know how to write that out. We don't know how to speak it. So we miss a lot of stuff. We don't even know how to identify with what the Bible says because we don't even know how to recognize it. What is the code? How is it working today? All this. So watch this. Daniel chapter 2 and Daniel chapter 7 become extremely important because we think that Revelation really started at Revelation 1, when the reality is Revelation is a continued conversation that's been going on since Genesis, or what we really should be called Barashat. So we're in this position where we're trying to talk to people, but we don't know the code. So what happens on the time code, on the timeline, if we can break down this time code? Well, here we go. Daniel chapter 2 and Daniel chapter 7 say some very interesting things. Daniel chapter 2, remember there's a dream, and Daniel and Ananiah, Hananiah, and Asadiah have to pray, who you know as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego later on. But Ananiah, Hananiah, Asadiah, Daniel, they come together and they pray. And because there's a dream that King Nebuchadnezzar has had. King Nebuchadnezzar has had this dream where he doesn't really know what it means, but it's bothering him. So he has all these people, including Daniel, who he has on the payroll, and they're supposed to be these great people who can tell the future and tell dreams, and some of them are magi or magicians, or some of them are magi as far as kings in their own right and stuff, but they should be spiritually inclined. And so he says, hey, I had this dream, and I'm not going to tell y'all what it is, but I want you to tell me what the dream was, and I want you to interpret it for me. Now, timeline, time code, catch what's going on, time code. This is going to be important for you. He said, I had this dream, right? Right? He said, I had this dream. You can reach out whenever you like, and we'll try to get back to you ASAP. He said, I had this dream, and it's going through a lot of stuff, and we're going through a lot of things. We're going through a lot of items. We have some issues and troubles and stuff going on. He said, and in this dream that I had, I want you to tell me what it is. Nobody knows what the dream is. Everybody's freaking out because the king says, well, why do I keep y'all on the payroll? If y'all can't even tell me what my dream is, then heck, he's like, I might as well get rid of y'all. Right? So he's going to kill everybody, and everybody is freaking out because that doesn't make sense. They're like, hey, hold up. Doesn't make sense. You won't even tell us what the dream is, but so everybody's scurrying around. He's going to kill them. His men are already gathering all of these people, these so-called prophets up. So Daniel finds out about it later when one of the people who he knows, who he's friends with, is coming on behalf of the king to get him. He's like, I'm sorry, Daniel, but the king decreed we got to take it. He's like, well, what is this about? He tells him what's up. Daniel says, hey, go to the king and ask him just for a little more time. And I'll be able to tell him what it is very soon. So he goes, he does that. The king agrees. He takes Adonai, Hananiah, Asadiah, who you call Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, because remember, their names were changed to Babylonian names. Remember, Daniel's Babylonian name is actually Belteshazzar. So one of the first things they do when you get enslaved is what? They change your name. They change your culture. But this person needed our culture to be able to interpret the dream. He was having a dream that was going to affect something, and he knew it was big, but he couldn't find it out. So these 4 Israelite young boys, by the way, 16, 15, 14, 13, in that age range, they come together and they pray. And after that, Daniel gets a download. After all 4 of them pray, Daniel gets a download, and he says, okay, I'm ready. He comes before the king, right, King Nebuchadnezzar, and he says, hey, this is what's going on in your dream. He says, you saw a big statue, and it was huge, and you saw the top of it from the head to the shoulders was gold, from the shoulders to about the waist area was silver, from the waist area to about the thigh area was bronze, and then you saw from there to the ankles was I'm sorry, gold, silver, bronze. Oh, and it was iron. And then he said after the iron, he said you saw the feet. The feet were clay and iron mixed together. And then all of a sudden there was this big stone that formed and it hits you and it blew everything up. Right. And the stone, after it blew the whole statue up, there was no sign of the statue left, but only the stone remained. And he goes, yeah. He says, okay, now this is what it means. He says, you are the gold. And after you, there's going to come a kingdom that will be silver. And after that will be a kingdom that comes that will be bronze. After that will come a kingdom that will be iron. Right. And he tell him the rest of the dream and stuff. And then Nebuchadnezzar is so wowed by it that he praises Yahweh. Now, it didn't last long because in the next chapter, he tries to throw the 3 Hebrew words that prayed with Daniel into the fire. So he didn't really learn nothing, at least not yet. Right. But Daniel interprets the dream. Now, watch this. What does this vision mean for us today? Timeline wise, breaking the code. What is the time code with this? What is this telling us? What is it that we're able to see here? Right? What is this timeline now? What is this code? What are we able to see here now? If the gold is Babylon, then what happens after that? The silver is the Medes and the Persians, right? Look it up. The Medes are the Medes and the Persians. They deal with what? Silver, right? So who comes after them in the Bronze Age? Who takes over? That would be the Greeks, who literally came into power. Greece was not even a Greece, the Athenians, the Macedonians, the Spartans, did I say Athenians already? I'm sorry. I'm trying to look for one other group, but they didn't even care to come together at all until they had to come and fight against Darius and Xerxes and all these names that you find. And by the way, this is not about black or white, because Greeks were considered to be people of color. Like Philip in Macedonia was somebody that was considered to be dark skinned too. So it's not about black, white, evil right now. We're talking about a spirit that continues to go through the time code. And how you doing, Sister Mary? Thank you. I just saw the message pop up. So I'll be praying for you. I'll try to check in with you. Thanks for being on with us. We're praying for you still. So it's not about black, white right now. I'm talking about a spirit. See, don't get it twisted. That's why we get not all skin folk is kinfolk. Even though we know who Israel is, the Bible tells you in Romans chapter 9, verse 6, an Israelite speaking to you says, hey, not all Israel is Israel. However, he turns around and says, Romans 10:1, it's still my prayer that Israel be saved. So, hey, Israel has to be sealed, Revelation chapter 7. But not all Israel is Israel. Don't think just because somebody looks like you, they got the best intention for you or for your people, or they want to study the Most High, or they want to help others. That's not how it goes. Like, there's a spirit that's attached. Don't get it twisted. Right? But going back to that statue, so you have the gold, Babylon, the silver, the Medes and Persian, the bronze, the Greeks. Then who takes over after the Greeks? Who takes over? Matter of fact, who keeps speaking Greek language? That would be the Romans, the Iron Age, right? After that, then you have two. You have 2 feet. And this is where Justinian, it becomes really crucial. And then we're going to go to Daniel 7 and make this live even more, right? See, we're dealing with this time code. So then you have 2 feet. Rome splits into 2 parts at the time of Justinian in the 400s, if you didn't know that. Rome splits into 2 parts in the 400s under Justinian. He goes to the the Eastern Roman Empire. You now know it as the Ottoman Empire, the Turkish Empire, the Khazarian, where you get the Khazarian Jews from. They kind of are remnants out of that and stuff as well. So you see them split this way, and then he gives the other side to who's called the Bishop of Rome. And thank you for the compliment. We appreciate it, right? He says it's the bishop to the Bishop of Rome. So he goes and brings Christianos type stuff, which is the mixing of what? When it's 2 feet, they're clay and iron together. Iron means Rome. What does clay mean? Clay in the Bible is talking about the hands of the potter. He deals with the clay. So the people who are his children, Israel, he forms them together as clay. He moves it together as clay. So the clay are his people. And iron is Rome. So you see a mixture of clay and iron. Right? A mixture of the word of Yah, his people, and also the mixture of iron, Rome. This is what you call Christianity. This is what Christianos is. See, Constantine, yeah, he started some of that stuff too, but he wasn't the person that had the 2 feet. He wasn't the one that he started mixing some of the stuff together, but it wasn't 2 feet yet. It was still one Rome. But out of the iron came the 2 feet. And the 2 feet now have 10 toes. Guess what happens? There are 10 tribes that fought against the 2 feet, specifically Western Rome more so. And we'll get into that in a second. And something's going to come. There's going to be some kind of rock, some kind of knowledge. It says that the rock started off from far away from the statue, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then it just came and eradicated all of that system. And we're learning about foundation and who we are and becoming more solid. How you doing, year 400? And becoming greater and more knowledgeable and all these things. We're getting bigger and bigger and stronger and stronger. And now people can't stop it. The only thing they can do now is just say, hey, if you talk about it, we're just going to say that you're a reverse racist. Thank you. Is it Nisha? Nisha Boyce? I hope I said that right. Nesha or Nisha? Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Right. And thanks for being part of the community, Nick. So we got it. So and it obliterates it. Now, here's where Daniel chapter 7 comes in and makes it really live for you, because now Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, right? And Daniel and the 3 Hebrew boys, they prayed together, and Daniel was able to interpret his dream. Then Daniel has another dream himself in Daniel chapter 7. Interesting. Daniel has another dream. See, once again, we look at Revelation just as by itself. You should never look at anything in the 66 books, outside the 66 books, whatever. You should never look at it just by itself, because you'll miss the point, because it's not written to be used just by itself. See, you got to read the whole thing, right? So Daniel chapter 7 comes up, same book, same prophet, right? And he's talking, he has a dream himself. In this dream, he says that he sees 4 beasts, right? So we had a statue that was 4 dealing with the iron and clay, and then these 10 toes. But in the dream he says, wait a minute, I saw 4 beasts. And thank you for the love, appreciate it. And what did he say these beasts look like, by the way? Yeah, reading is holy. I'm sorry I missed that minister. Nice, amen. Right? So he says, I saw 4 beasts here. Now, what did these 4 beasts look like? These are not the same 4 beasts, by the way, that are going to be shown in Revelation chapter 4. No. He says, I saw 4 beasts. What did they look like? He said the first one looked like it was a lion, but it had wings on it. Right? Second beast, it was a bear with a hunched shoulder with some ribs in its mouth. Okay. Grand Rising T, how you doing? Then the third beast, he said, was a leopard, but it had 4 heads. Okay. And in the fourth beast, he said it was just a huge, all I can describe it is it was monstrous. It was a beast, and it had 10 horns on the top of its head. And by the way, interesting enough, the same thing kind of deals with the Antichrist spirit, to where it has ram's horns on his head, but you can't tell what it looks like, but you got to pay attention to what the ram says. This is Revelation 13. You got to pay attention to what this beast with the ram horns, because it might have the horns of a sheep or a ram, but out of its mouth, it speaks like a dragon, like a serpent. It's blasphemous when it speaks. Yeah, there is a United Nations statue and a statue that's in modern Israel, and a couple other statues in America that fit the description, by the way. So people are aware of this. Once again, we're not aware because we don't know the code, right? Keep on reading. Proverbs is great. Don't forget, when you read in Proverbs chapter 1, verse 3 tells you learn about equity. Proverbs chapter 1, verse 8 says, fathers give instruction, mothers lay down the law. That'll bless you. And so much of what you're about to read in the book of Proverbs, when you comprehend that, wisdom, equity, understanding, reverence or fear of the Most High, all that stuff, it's going to bless you. So keep on reading. I encourage you. That's great, right? But back to Daniel, this first beast, the lion with the wings in Babylon, which matches the gold part of the statue that we talked about in Daniel 2, Daniel 7, the lion with the wings matches Babylon. Why? If you do some research, in Babylon, they loved having the lion with the wings. That's Babylon. He saw Babylon in the dream. He would have known this, by the way, because he was in Babylon. So when he saw that, that wasn't a problem for him, right? We don't know it because we don't know the culture. We don't know the code. We don't know what things have been changed. They're talking about that there's Babylon going on. There's a Babylon spirit around. You better be careful about it, right? But then it says, but keep on moving with it. Then you have the bear with the ribs, with hunched over. It was always off balance. Now, if you study the Medes and the Persians, that's the next part of the statue that we talked about. If you study the Medes and the Persians, they were never balanced. They were fierce. They would crush folk, right? They had ribs in their mouth, but they never really had it all together. And so that's one of the reasons why eventually the Greeks, bronze on the statue, they would come and take over. Now, with the Greeks, who's the most famous, even though we can talk about Philip of Macedonia, we can talk about the Athenians, we can talk about, what the Spartans did, 300, by the way. King Leonidas would have looked like us. I know that's hard for people to believe, but King Leonidas probably was locked up and everything, right? Right. But when we look at this, though, what we have this leopard with 4 heads. Most of us only care about Alexander the Great, right? So out of Greece, Alexander the Great, he is swift and fast and powerful like a leopard, but when he dies, he leaves no heir. So when he dies, he has 4 generals that were like supposed to be his buddies, and they split his kingdom into 4 parts. Matter of fact, one of them, the one who takes over Kemet and makes it Egyptian, right? Because Cleopatra comes from, his name is Ptolemy. She comes out of the Ptolemaic dynasty, right? So Cleopatra is not Kemetic. She is Egyptian. She is Greek. She is not African. She was black by colonial social contract, but she is not African, right? You got to know this stuff, right? You got to know the code. So she is evidence of one of the 4 tribes. Matter of fact, one of the 4 generals, the last place to come out of those 4 generals that split up, that still had power, the last kingdom to go down was actually in India. So if you actually want to look up some of this stuff, you'll actually find that one of the last places that was there was in India, to show you how much mixing and matching in culture and how they started getting the blonde hair, blue eyes, and having 4 different groups of people. And now they got a 5th group called the Dalits or the Untouchables and all that stuff. Like, that's coming out of that split. So you have 4 groups now that are split off of this one leopard or this one kingdom or Alexander the Great and what he left, right? And out of that, who takes over even in Kemet, even in Africa, even in North Africa, even in Israel? Who's going to be the next people to take over? It's going to be the iron. Who's the iron? Rome. And it says Rome, this beast that continues, this spirit that continues to be around today, it's just changed forms, but it's the same spirit. This beast, it says in Daniel 7, remember, in the other one, it said that that at the end of the statue was iron, then it mixed with iron and clay. This beast is a mixture of iron and clay, 2 feet, Western Rome, Eastern Rome. We talked about 10 toes, 10 tribes that fought against it. Interestingly enough, though, in Daniel 7, we get what we would call more, we really shouldn't use this word because revel means to rejoice. So we really should say we get more revealing, but a lot of you would say you get more revelation. So whatever. But we get more revealed to us here. You ready? Daniel chapter 7, it says that this beast has 10 horns that popped out of his head. Noticeably, by the way, go read Revelation 12. The serpent has 10 horns. Go read Revelation chapter 13. The beast or the government out of the serpent has 10 horns. Okay. So the beast, the government, 10 horns. The serpent has 10 horns. Daniel chapter 7, this beast is talking about has 10 horns. Praise Yah. The Holy Spirit, she moving, but we're going to keep on going to it. So we got some more to go. See, this is why we got to know the code. We got to break the code. In order to break the code, you got to know the time code, what they changed, and what we don't even recognize we're going through. So, right? So, but let's keep on going. So now we got this beast, and we can't really put our finger on exactly what the beast looks like, but we do know, remember, the beast I talked about, Revelation chapter 13, the Antichrist, so spirits of the second beast that's going to upload the first beast or help the first beast. And in Revelation 13, it looks like it's a sheep, kind of, sort of, because it's got horns of a ram, but it speaks like a serpent. It's blasphemous when it speaks. Well, it says this beast in Daniel chapter 7, there's 10 horns on top. It says 3 horns all of a sudden start moving and they're plucked out of the head by this one horn that all of a sudden starts pushing its way out of the head of the beast. So it's on top and out of the head. So now there's 8 horns, but this one horn grows bigger than the other 7 horns that are left. Pay attention to what I'm saying. 8 horns, now, and one of the horns is bigger than all other 7 horns. It's in charge of all other 7 horns. Pay attention, right? Behold, pay attention. Get this, right? So it's going to be bigger. Catch that. Catch that, right? I'm paying attention. Amen, right? And I hope I'm not coming across like down on anybody. I just want y'all to get this, right? I love this when we know who we are, when we know what this stuff means, when we have the culture down. Everything comes out of culture, right? So this main horn all of a sudden is coming out, and it's bigger than all the other 7 horns, right? And well, see, you know where I'm going, right? With the Vatican, right? But it says this one is bigger than the other ones, and 3 will be plucked out. Remember, I said there were 10 toes, and there were 10 tribes that fought against when the two feet came. This is where it pops in, and you're like, wow, right? We can't. After a while, you can't deny this stuff. The 2 feet. Western Rome, Eastern Rome. Justinian left this to the Bishop of Rome, who was unofficially, but officially the first pope. Don't let them bring you in that code where they say, oh, Peter was the first pope. Peter was married, and Peter never said he was a pope. Okay? Don't let them fool you. Remember, when they enslaved us, they had us, when they first started enslaving us and calling us Negroes around the Inquisition times, they started having us capitulate to Roman Catholicism, or else they said they would take our children, and then they still took our children anyways and made us slaves. If you were 3 and under, you got to stay where you were. You were trained to basically live like them, but you were still going to be a house Negro. If you were like ages, what was it, 7 to 10, or no, 3 to 10 rather, you were going to end up being a slave where you were, but you couldn't be moved legally, not yet. And then if you were ages, and in some places you couldn't be separated from your children yet, right? Just like they did in states, some places you could, some places you couldn't. And then if you were ages, 11 and older, basically, you were going somewhere, and you better become a Roman Catholic. If not, we're going to kill you, right? So going back to this now, Western Rome is split. Eastern Rome is split. Western Rome is split. On the east side, Justinian has gone over there. On the west side, he said, hey, Bishop of Rome, do your Christianos thing, the mixing of iron and clay. We're going to do it over here. Y'all going to do it over there. 2 feet doing it together. But there are 10 tribes that ain't going for it. Some of these tribes are still left over. Some of these tribes, you might call them France. You might call them Spain. You might call them Germany. At one point, you might have called it Normandy. You might call it Portugal, right? But there were these 10 tribes that fought against Western Rome. The Pope sends word to Justinian, hey, you said you were going to make sure that we could go ahead and you would support us, and you would make sure that this was easy transition for us. We got 10 tribes coming against us. Now, we could fight, but it'd probably be a lot easier if you just came over and handled business for us. Justinian says, no problem. I got you. Because even though we West and East, we got each other's back. We boys, we brothers. And don't let these people fool you. You think, oh, they're Prussian and they're Russian and they're Ukrainian and they're United States and they're Canadian. When it's time for them to move against you, they move as one. What's up, Cairo? How you doing, bro? Right? When they get ready to crush you, they move as one. Don't get it twisted. So don't all religion versus science and all this. When it's time to move, they move as one. We should be moving as one, because we should be Aleph, one, whole, holy, right? We should be one. We're split, but we should be one. So what happens? West Rome, Justinian sends 3 legions, right? And a legion is usually about 5,000 men. He sends about 15,000 men. He sends 3 legions, and they wipe out, or they're coming to wipe out anybody who's against them. 10 tribes were going to fight. 7 of the tribes said, hey, we back off. 3 of the tribes said, no, give us liberty or give us death. Right? And how you doing, Draco? Thank you so much. Appreciate you. They said, no, give us liberty or give us death. We come on, we're going to fight to the end. And they most assuredly did. They fought, and they lost, and they died. They were completely taken over, just like they did with Carthage and the bloody stuff, just like they did with Israel, not a stone left upon a stone. They wiped them out. Their culture to do so. The same thing they done to others, they did unto them. Even see, we would say themselves, but they didn't look at themselves as being all one, right? So they killed them off. Right? These 3 tribes. And what did it say in Daniel 7? This one horn was going to rise, and it was going to kill them off. The 7 horns would stay the same size, but this one horn came out, plucked out the other 3, and became bigger than the other horns. So now Western Rome under the Bishop of Rome is greater than everybody else and will never be not greater than these other countries, at least for a time, times, and half a time. That's in your Bible. It keeps saying this over and over again. Now, if we're talking about physical days, time, times, and half a time is 3.5 years. But in a dream or a vision in our culture, time, times, and half a time, or each day rather, translates to a year. If you go through a day in a dream, you've gone through a year in a dream, especially in the culture of Israel. So if you said, hey, man, I had a dream, I was like 30 days, I was doing this, they would do, oh, we need to figure out 30 years. There's a time when the Most High talks about 40 days, you're going to have to do blah, blah. Well, guess what? Then the Israelites end up being in the wilderness for 40 years, right? So a time, times, and half a time in physical is 3.5 years. A time, times, and half a time turns into 1,260 years. So if this is accurate, the time code, and we know how to do the code, what can we see on the timeline that ends up being 1,260 years? Well, remember, Justinian came and killed them all. Bishop of Rome was in place. It is not until 538, so the next century, 538 AC, in the 6th century, 538 AC, that the Roman Catholic Church says, because of what Justinian did for us and because of the power we now have over Western Rome, he says from that point on, we're going to call um, um, or we're going to decree, we're going to say that we have power, not because of the Holy Spirit, not because of God Almighty, not because of the deist, not because of yeses. They say we're going to say we have power over everybody because of what they call the Justinian decree. See, you got to know law. People keep telling you go away from law, but these laws are waxing you if you don't know what they are. How are you going to come and become a curse breaker if you don't know what the code is? You got to become a code breaker to become a curse breaker. And you're trying to break a curse off you without being able to read the code. So the Justinian decree is in 538 AC. Now remember, the number that we're looking for, if we're right, if we're correct about this, something's going to happen to this horn. Why? Because now go to Revelation chapter 13. See how the timeline works? Praise Yah. Revelation 13, when Yochanan or Yochanan or John, when he looks up and he says, hey, I saw this beast and it had 7 heads and it had 10 horns. And I saw it, and one of the heads looked like it had been cut off, or it had been killed, or it had something had happened to it. It should be dead, but somehow, some way, it's still alive. Well, we got, and it even uses in Revelation, it still talks about a time, times, and half a time, 1,260 years. What's going to happen in 1,260 years? Well, if we're right, the Justinian decree, 538 AC. Well, what happens 1,260 years later? Well, in 1798, which is 1,260 years later, in the dream or in the spirit or in time, even a time, times, and half a time, 1,260 years later, in 1798, Napoleon is getting tired of listening to this horn, this Pope, who says that he has to be bigger than everybody else and everybody else has to be under him. Napoleon says, I'm going to be bigger than everybody else, and the Pope better let me do what I do. Remember, King Henry, that's why he left. That's why he took the Protestant movement, made it his own. He became the Pope of Protestantism because he wanted to keep having as many wives and divorcing and killing and doing all the stuff with as many wives as he wanted to. The Pope wouldn't let him, so he left Roman Catholicism because he got tired of the big horn. And he just started speaking his own blasphemies. But it says this horn speaks many blasphemies. Now, what does the word blasphemy mean, by the way, too? We got to throw that in there. The word blasphemy basically means 2 main things. It means either you think that you are the Most High, you say you're the Most High, you say you're Elohim or a God or whatever, or you say you can forgive the same way that the Most High can forgive. In other words, your forgiveness is on the same level, right? So you either are the Most High or you say you can forgive like the Most High. That's what you're saying. That's why they said Yahshua was blasphemous when he said he was the Messiah. Why? Because they knew the Messiah had to be one in the same with the Most High. So that's why they said he was blasphemous. Blasphemy does not just mean we don't like what you say. Blasphemy means you think you are the Most High. That's what blasphemous means. You think you are the Most High, right? Or you say that your forgiveness is on the same level. Now we should forgive so we can be forgiven, most that, but you cannot forgive the way the Most High can. Now, what does the Pope or the bishop or the cardinal or the priest or whatever say? If you want to ask for forgiveness, you don't pray to the Most High for forgiveness. You go to the priest, and the priest will forgive you because it's blasphemous. You can't pray to him. You have to pray through somebody else. So that somebody else says they're in a position to forgive you, but Yahweh cannot forgive. Okay. What is the other definition of blasphemy? They say that they are the Most High. Yeah, they call it confession, right? What is the other thing that they say that's blasphemous, or thing they do? Or makes you blasphemous, rather, excuse me. You say that you are the Most High yourself. Do you know the Pope is supposed to be the vicar? He is supposed to literally be Yahshua HaMashiach, or who they call Jesus, right? Jesus Christos, but right, or I don't know if they say Christos Jesus or Jesus Christos or Jesus Christos, whatever. But they say that they are, in fact, the Son of Elohim upon the earth in the flesh, right? So here is this beast. Should have been killed. Something should have happened to kill it. Daniel chapter 7 says the same horn that's now more powerful than the other horns. It speaks many blasphemies. But Napoleon kills it in 1798, times and half a time, 1,260 years later. Wow. Right? But then somehow, some way, the Roman Catholic Church builds up steam again. And now it's like it never happened. Right? Somehow it's like it never happened and we don't see it. So John says, hey, pay attention. He's telling you, pay attention. Yeah, there was a beast, 7 heads, government, all that is bad, it's terrible. But don't forget, in the midst of all that, one of them heads should be dead. It's mixing the word of Yah with the world stuff. It's mixing it with, you say Jesus, which is half man, half Zeus. And if you don't believe it, well, Jesus, why is it that you say Pegasus? And that's the horse of Zeus. You say the mouse, that's the sister of Zeus. But for some reason, Jesus or Jesus is not half man, half Zeus. All of a sudden, you say, no, it's transliteration. But his name is Yahshua or Yeshua, some people would say, or whatever. And it doesn't transliterate. It doesn't even translate to that. But people keep telling us it does. You see? It's a Roman Catholic spirit that comes from a Rome spirit that comes from a Greek spirit, which comes from a Medo-Persian spirit, which comes from a Babylonian spirit. And if you want to get technical, you can go back to an Assyrian spirit, which comes from a Kemetic spirit, which comes from Cush. Remember, Cush actually is the one that ends up losing a battle and then goes away in shame. And his son Nimrod, that came with his wife Ishtar, Easter, then Nimrod and Ishtar, son and mother, are going to come together and become husband and wife. Then Nimrod is going to be killed by Shem and others who are going to come against them. And then all of a sudden, you're going to have Ishtar, who said she was a moon goddess who came to the earth in an egg, and she is fertile, having all this sex, or having all these children. And then she's going to say her son Nimrod, after he was long dead, impregnated her while she was having sex with other people, and make her pregnant in her womb. And therefore, the birth that she gives is supposed to be the son of God. Because they knew that there was going to be, remember Genesis chapter 3, about a shot Gemon, Genesis chapter 3, they knew that there was going to be a father, right, who's supposed to be the Most High. There's going to be this woman, when you study her in Genesis 3, Jeremiah 3, and Revelation 12, which is Israel. And out of Israel and this father would come a child, and the child would be bruised in the heel by the serpent, but would ultimately smash his head, would defeat him. Revelation chapter 12 talks about that he was smashed, defeated, sent back to the earth. And he comes looking for who? He comes looking for Israel. He sends the water. See, he sends the water out to go to Israel, who's in the wilderness, has separated herself from the system in Revelation 12. But it says every time the water represents people. So out of the serpent, he spits the people. The people go to Israel, who's in the wilderness, but it says every time they come up, the clay stands up for us. See, we're clay with no iron, but they're iron and clay mixed. That's the difference between followers of the way and Christians. I know you don't want to hear that, but that's where this comes from. Before there was a Christianos, before there was a Christian, there was the Bible. There was the word, there was the Torah, there was the Torah, there were the scrolls, there was Savar. You said it started with Cain, same spirit, the elites are the Canaanites bloodline. Well, the Canaanites are not necessarily Cain's bloodline, but I get what you're saying. Because even when you talk about Canaan or Canaan, you know that there was Cain was named, and then he left and went and set up Nod, which he was a place where he's vagabond, wandering, all that stuff, right? But then don't forget that Canaan or Canaan, right? That's the name of of Seth. Seth eventually names his son Canaan to try and make right for what his brother did to his other brother that was dead, right? So it's different. There's a different mindset with that, but I get what you're saying. The Canaanites, even remember the Canaanites before they were corrupted. Um, um, Melchizedek was a Canaanite priest who believed in Jehovah, right? And even when they used the term Baal or Baal at first, Baal was actually literally just was their word of saying Elohim, but they believed that Baal was Jehovah, right? And eventually started worshiping the creation more than the creator. And now we even found it in the 1990s. They found thousands upon thousands of scrolls and tablets, even where they saw Baal, and they kept looking back further and further. They were like, oh, Baal started off as one being. Melchizedek was Canaanite, right? He wasn't even an Israelite. Israelite didn't even didn't even come into being yet, right? Melchizedek was not even a Hebrew, right? But Melchizedek kept up the law, right? So, and it's actually Abraham who gives a tithe to Melchizedek. He gives a tribute to him, right? And what happens after he gives a tribute to that land? It will be Israel, his grandchildren, so to speak. It will be the Israelites who will come back later on to be able to live in the same land that they tithe to the priest in that land. You see? So it's a little different. But once again, see the timeline, the time code. We don't know the code. We're not aware of the time code. We're not aware. So we can't break the code if we don't know the timeline. How do you break a code when you don't know the timeline? How do you see yourself in something if you're not even aware, wow, all this stuff happened in order? And guess what? In 1798, guess what starts happening after the Pope dies? Guess what starts happening to us as a people? In Haiti, we start working on independence. I know England teaches people that, it was England who were the first people to make sure that slaves were free. No, we freed ourselves. We saw it was possible. we saw that it was possible to free ourselves. Wow. Right? Timeline. Do you not know that we started reading about ourselves? Nat Turner, who was a house Negro of sorts, he was allowed to be a pastor. He had a white overseer that would sit in that big chair y'all see in churches. He would be there to be able to see what was going on. Right? He was there to see what was going on with all these different things that were happening. And those who are on the podcast, thank you so much for being on. We appreciate you. Please join us on Facebook, YouTube, or TikTok. And we look forward to seeing you guys soon. Have a great day. Thank you. Right. For those of us that are still on, let's keep going. Right. Where was I at? I'm sorry. Somebody help me. Where was I just at? Because I was reading something saying that I got mixed up. Where were we at? Oh yeah, 1798. And Nat Turner. Thank you, Holy Spirit. So Nat Turner is in a position where he read, but he was only allowed to read so much, and he had to preach what they told him. Then all of a sudden, Nat Turner finds an actual Bible. Because remember, there was a Bible, and then there was something called a slave Bible. And the slave Bible, they took stuff out. They removed things. Sometimes literally just ripping pages out. Thomas Jefferson, if you ever go to his manor in Monticello there's still books there where he ripped Bibles where he ripped out pages because he didn't like it when he was confronted with treating people like respect and not treating people as slaves. Anything that didn't have to do with something that they could manipulate into slavery, they didn't keep it. Everything that they had changed and it looked like it was okay, they kept it in there. So Nat Turner finds an actual Bible, and then he reads about it, and he says, wait a minute, what did Moses do? Moses said, let my people go. Why didn't they tell us about this? He saw himself in the Bible for the first time. Time code. And then what did he do? He said, oh, the people of Kemet died. He said, well, hey, I'll be Moses. Now, see, he was still ignorant of how the law worked, but he had read enough to say, well, if people are going to come against us, then, they get swallowed up by the sea. And then they had a revolt. there were many revolts, by the way, but they had a revolt. And when they had the revolt, right, they had the revolt, but also the Haitian Revolution. Guess what? Toussaint Louverture, when they came over and took over, guess what he did? He read a Bible, and he was like, "Wait a minute, Moses, who is this? Wow, okay." Haitian Revolution, right? He joins it and he takes over and makes sure that they're more, more structured and ordered, helps them to win. He says, "Yeah, you know what? If Moses did this, then maybe I can do it." Timeline. He saw himself in the scripture. Well, how did he see himself? Because they knew he was cultured and educated enough, and they had heard rumblings enough to be like, "Oh, this is us." By the way, if you don't believe that, there's a book written by a man called Olaudah Equiano. His first name spelled Olaudah, or actually, I'm sorry, Olaudah. Last name Equiano, Equiano. He wrote a autobiography, so he wrote about his own life. This is his personal account. And when he wrote the book about himself, he said he was taken from his birthright. He was actually a we probably think like Nigeria, in the area of Nigeria, but he was a Nigerian king. And you see these same countries keep popping up that I'm talking about on the time code, right? But he was a Nigerian king, and or a prince, excuse me, on his way to becoming king. And about probably 10, 11 years old, somewhere in there, he's taken as a slave. It's very traumatic for him, and he actually forgets his childhood, but he buys his own freedom by the time he's 20 years old. He actually buys his own freedom by the time he's 20 years old. And so when he buys his own freedom, he then keeps hearing people talk about this Bible. Everybody keeps talking about this Bible. He's doing pretty well for himself, got his own place, got his own land, but he keeps hearing everybody talk about this Bible, right? And so when he goes and reads his Bible, he starts reading it, and he says, "Wait a minute. When I was a child, we did this stuff. We kept these commandments." He started having flashbacks. He's like, "Wait a minute. We didn't mix this with that. We didn't do this. We made sure our clothes looked like this. We had sacrifices like this and stuff." He goes, "Oh." He's like, "I think I was an Israelite." Now that's somebody who paid for his own way, freed himself, right? Through hard work, hard labor. He was a sailor, but still a slave, frees himself, educates himself, reads the Bible, says, "I see myself," not just only I see myself as far as skin tone or needing to be free or come out of slavery. He says, "I see myself in the customs and traditions I was raised in." But see, I didn't remember. See, we think that remember means to recall, right? He said, no, like I was a member of this tribe. I got dismembered from the tribe. And now that I've come into knowledge of this, I'm remembering. I'm coming back into membership with what I always was. And he says, and I'm an Israelite. I mean, that's what he said. But if you don't know the code, you don't know that people even change that. You probably never even heard that name. Exactly. It's always humbling and inspiring to see yourself in this stuff. It's extremely humbling and inspiring to be able to see yourself in this. And let's do a salah real quick. I need to go. Looks like my puppy, I can see far away, looks like she's gotten out and she's probably ripping stuff up in there. Let's take if y'all can stay around, don't leave. I know some of y'all gonna leave. I promise you. Give me like a minute, 2 minutes. I just gotta make sure I put her back in her little pen, I guess. I was trying to be nice, but I guess you're gonna have to be in the pen for another hour. Be right back. Whew. Sorry about that. She running in there with people's clothing and stuff. I know if I didn't do something, I'm gonna get yelled at. I'm not gonna get in trouble. Amen. So, but can you see where all that stuff is? How all that stuff works? When you don't know who you are in the time code, when you don't know who you are, it's easy for somebody to tell you who you are. If you don't have a vision for yourself, somebody else does. If you don't have a mission for yourself, somebody else does. If you don't have a history for yourself, or you don't have your own story, but you only have his story, then guess what? He'll give you what you're looking for. I'm looking for somebody to tell me anything about myself. No problem, I got you. Right? I'm looking to see myself on anything I can. How you doing, Cream? I got you. Somebody stepped up, I got you. Somebody stepped up, I got you. You need this to be there. You need me to tell you who you are. You need me to tell you that, every February, you need me to tell you February is almost upon us, right? And they're gonna go right back to the most you're gonna get, probably, most people gonna go right back to 1860s. That's where your history starts every time. You have no history outside of that. How you doing, Locks? You have no history outside of it. We'll go right back to the same place every time. No problem. You want us to tell you who you are, paint a picture, we'll give you the shortest month, right? By the way, in their culture, February is the unlucky month. If you don't know how that works, even in the calendar, here's a time code for you. You know that their calendar used to only be 10 months. Y'all know that, right? The calendar that you use today, the Julian calendar, Gregorian calendar, it only used to be 10 months. Yeah, and if you don't know, they know. And if you don't know and they know, we in real bad shape. As my wife said last night, if you have to go, she quoted Malcolm X, if you have to go to your enemy looking for them to help you, you're in bad shape. Remember, they only had 10 months. If you don't believe it, December, that's 10. November, no, that's 9. October, oct, that's 8. September, sept, that's 7. Then August is named after Augustus, that's 6. July is named after Julius Caesar, right? That's 5. And then go back to 4. Keep going. June, 3, May, 2, April, and then 1, Mar, or 1. But we don't know the code. We don't know the code. And then they added January and February. Why? Because they realized they actually, Julius Caesar actually found out about the fact that Kemetic people, when they went to Kemet, right? It really wasn't, but it was the Greeks they were allowing to be over there. The Greeks owed them money, so he went looking for money. But the Kemetic people, they found out about their calendar. They were like, oh, you guys have 360 days and you add 5 days for this and this and this and this and this, and then wait a minute, you do an extra day here or there. Oh, okay, like, all right, we should probably look at that, because Julius Caesar for a long time was in charge of the calendar, even before he became what you think of him as being on top of everything. He actually was in charge of the calendar at one point. So he had to actually literally, like, he was in charge with updating the calendar, because stuff would get so off track. They'd be 30, 40 days off sometimes. So he'd have to change it to make sure that people were on the right track. So a lot of their story, you can't even tell. That's why they'd be like, we think around this time, or we think around that time, or maybe this time, because they don't know, because they had to change the calendar so much. So we don't even know when they say this happened. You don't really know when it was sometimes or when it wasn't, because it can be a few, uh, some days off, a month even off. So they changed it and they added January and February based off of some Greco-Roman gods that they liked. But February, the god that was there, they looked at that as that god kind of was unlucky too. So that's why it's not just because it's Black History Month, right? But that's why 28 days, they made it 28 days. So the gods they liked a lot, they said, okay, we'll make them 31 days. So that's why you have 31 day months. Then they said, well, we like some gods a little less, but we like them a lot. They're all gods. So, hey, we'll give them 30. But February, that god, we don't really like that one. So it's got some unlucky stuff that comes with it. So what are we going to do with it? Well, we'll go ahead and make it shorter than all the days. But what about when we have to add that extra day like they do in Kemet? No problem. We'll make it 28 days, so that when it's big, it's only 29 days. So it's always the fewest days, because in their culture, it's the most unlucky month. It becomes even a leap year, but you think it's a leap year because you're trying to leap back into it. No. The culture is it's a leap year because they're trying to leap past that month. They don't want that month to be as long. So even if we have to go forward, we still manage to leap past that God. So which means they're deities, or they're what we would call gods. These deities, they actually are not based off of what they do. They're based off of man. Isn't that interesting that they keep telling us about this man-made stuff, but you keep living by the man-made stuff, and they have no problem with their man-made deities. But when they say that, hey, the Bible's written by man, they have no problem. They have a problem with you. They have a problem with what's yours. You see, the time code shows us that even in how they tell time, they seem to have a problem with you. But when it comes to their time, when it comes to them doing Saturnalia, right? Something that existed before there was Christianity, something that existed before there was Rome. The changing of the seasons, being afraid of it. Good morning, or God morning. The morning of the gods, God bye or goodbye, God be with you, because there's going to be this God. There's going to be even this Santa Claus type figure. You know, when you go to theology of Norse theology of Norse people, you're going to find out that Odin, he went around in a sleigh and he flew around, and everybody was afraid of him. I've said this before. I've said it. I'll say it again. Here's a hint for you. Here's one way you can look at it. They know, they're telling you what it is because there's a show that used to be popular by the writers of The Simpsons called Futurama. Right? Had like 10 seasons or something like that. And if you go watch it, that show is based off of a Greek play. That's why her name is Leela, but it's Tarangalila. It's a Greek name based off of a Greek play. That's why you'll see that she's what? A cyclops. And you'll see that there's other cyclops and stuff like that. That's why the Jamaican guy, they just try to throw us in there like we part of the culture. But the Jamaican guy, Hermes, right? His name is Hermes. Hermes is a deus. He's a deity, right? He's the same as Nike. He's supposed to be the messenger. They have a messaging company. So who manages the messaging company? Hermes does. Right? You know, the word by literally is be with ye. It's short for be with ye. So God be with ye, but God morning. See, in their culture, when the sun's not coming up as much, it must be the evil God around. And so they mourn when he's out. God morning. Even in their timeline of their days, in their months, it's all showing you. So you don't know how to break the code. How do we become curse breakers and break this off of us? This is why we've been telling y'all about the calendars. If you like one or whatever, whether you want a virtual one or a physical one, this is why we offer this stuff. Not just because we're trying to like give us donations for this, blah, blah. Like people don't know. People don't even know. How do I look at our holy days if I don't know what they are? How do I know about Nisan to start the new year? How do I know that Nisan's going to be in March? And so that's when our new year starts. And then how do I know that on February 23rd, I guess technically you could say maybe February 22nd, but how do I know on February 23rd that I need to make sure that I'm getting the leaven out of my home when I don't even know that? I don't know the timeline. Because a little leaven, it raises the whole bunch. So for 40 days, we're supposed to remove leaven. Why? Because it's a reminder to us that before we go to Passover and do it, not only for how we came out of Kemet, but also do it in remembrance of him, we're supposed to, for 40 days beforehand. So you do it and you call it Lent, but Lent is connected to Lupercalia. Lupercalia is when they had sex all the time, like wolves, right? Luper, literally talking about the wolf. For 40 days, they did that. The Pope saw it. Here we go, Roman Catholic Church. Big horn popping up. The Pope saw it, was like, yo, time out. We got to chill with this. We got to at least have some pretenses. Even if they false pretenses, we got to have something on here that says we at least trying to be holy in some way. So the Pope said, okay, no problem. We'll go ahead and have one day before. You might call it Fat Tuesday. You might call it Carnival. And other places, even in India and other places, remember that Greco-Roman stuff we talked about that traveled, those four heads from the leopard? Some of this stuff travels. So they even call it something different there. But everybody has that one day where everybody out there, they doing the stuff for the bees. They're exposing their bodies. They're doing all this wild stuff. They do all that wild dances that was actually native dances at first, but they took it to be able to make it part of this wild ceremony. So they even took that from you, all this different stuff, the trumpets and all that stuff. They took the trumpets and all that stuff, and they made it and something different. And then after that, you're supposed to give up something for 40 days. Well, what they did back then was, hey, have as much sex as y'all want, do all this stuff, whatever. And then after that, hey, we need to let it go for 40 days. On Ash Wednesday, they put a tav, which is part of your culture, or you call it a cross. It's the last character in Avda, or what we call Hebrew writing. The very last character of the 22 characters, it's a tav. They mark it, they say it's finished, and then they go ahead and say for 40 days, let's see if we can give up sex. That's where that stuff comes from. But you are supposed to 40 days prior to Passover, not 40 days prior to Easter, but 40 days prior to Passover, you are supposed to start making sure you get leaven out of your home to represent you're trying to get sin out. Then you have Passover, which you have lamb, unleavened bread, wine, um, and I'm sorry, what's the term I'm looking for? No season on the lamb. What's the bitter herbs and things like that. And you have that. You make sure it's all consumed. Whatever you don't consume has to be burned or buried, or at least nowadays throw it in the trash. Don't keep it for leftovers. Then after that, you go through 7 more days, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, because we still want to have the mindset of, hey, the leaven at this moment in time for us represents sin. So we still, just because we have Passover, doesn't mean we're going to go right back into sin. And then we can finally start dealing with the leaven again. It's a time code. It's a time code. See, we don't know how to break the code because we don't have a sense of how to keep the time. Right? Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind. Have no fear of atomic energy because none of them can stop the time. Bob Marley added, how long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it. Why? Because we've got to fulfill the book. What's the name of the song? Won't you help me sing these songs of freedom? Because all I ever had, redemption song. The word redeemed means to what? To be reconsidered. See, to redeem the time. Everybody talks about redeem the time, right? Well, redeem the time means reconsider the time. You will not deem yourself worthy in time if you never reconsider yourself in time. And if you take too much time, how you doing, big guy? If you take too much time, you might run out of time. So before you run out of time, let's start reconsidering who you've been so you can reconsider yourself in time. Because it's in time is coming. Right? The eschatology is something we're studying because it's here. Right? We don't know how to break the code. But if we're going to be code breakers, we have to do what? We have to deal with the time code. If we're going to be curse breakers, we have to be code breakers. If we're going to be code breakers, we got to know the time code. They coded this stuff. And the Most High coded it too. Right? Remember where we started in this series. Right? Matthew chapter 10. I'm sorry, Matthew chapter 13. Matthew chapter 13, verses 3 through 9, or 3 through 8, he gives the parable of the sower of the seed. Verse 9, Yashua says, let those that have ears to hear, hear. His disciples then asked him the question, why do you always speak to them, not to us? Why do you speak to them in code or in parables? And Yahshua says, well, it is not for them to know the mysteries or the code of the kingdom of heaven, but it is to you. It is to the disciples. It is to those in the kingdom to know the mysteries. Why? Because you know the code. Why? Because you live the culture. The culture gives you the code. What I say, right? All these things we've been talking about, we're just reviewing some of the stuff now at this point, right? All the stuff we've been talking about. Death and life is in the power of the tongue, and those that love it will eat the fruit thereof. With the same tongue, with the same language of a nation. That's what a tongue is. The language of a nation. With the same language of a nation, with the same tongue, I can speak to some people and say something, but they will get something, but some other people will get something completely different out of it. Why? Because their culture dictates what they know. Your culture dictates what's coded. If it's coded for you, it's because you don't know the culture. If I speak of something and you say, I've never heard that before, it's because somebody's not been culturally accurate with you. They haven't told you the truth. They've been telling you some stuff that's out of school. That's why Ezekiel 34 tells us, before we start talking about some of this other stuff, Ezekiel 34 says we got to deal with these preachers, these supposed leaders, these supposed marah, these supposed elders, these supposed teachers, these supposed masters of the word that is supposed to be schooling us in this stuff, but we've never heard of it before. Why is it that some of us have been in these churches or cirque all our adult lives? Some of us have been in church and cirque our entire adult lives, and yet nobody told us the code. We got to start asking ourselves, how does that happen if these are holy places? I mean, we're supposed to be in holy places, but we don't get a holy word. We're supposed to be a chosen generation, of royal priesthood, a holy nation, right? A holy nation. We're supposed to know things that other people don't know about ourselves, and yet other people are writing books about us, and we still don't know. Other people enslaved us and called us Negroes before they called other people Negroes in the slave trade, and we don't know that was us. Written by the slave owners. written by the Roman Catholic Church. They told you that they enslaved you. Right, those gatekeepers, and they should be gatekeepers. They should be gatekeepers. They should not be allowing us to not enter into his gate with thanksgiving and to his court with praise, but they keep us from even coming inside. Yeah, a lot of us have found more, on social media, and that's unfortunate. That's why we even have to be better. We're trying our best to make sure, hey, like, let's get together and let's make sure people in areas are getting together and things like that. We don't want to come to a place where we become like everybody else. Well, we just come together when, it's Sunday or Saturday or whenever you worship, right? Because everybody in that Bible, they kept the code together. They kept time together. They kept the peace about them together. They kept love together. They kept harmony together. They kept peace together. They taught this to their children. Our children don't know the alphabet. They know the alphabet, Greco-Roman, but they don't know the alphabet. See, all this stuff is Greco-Roman. You like to be romantic. Oh, let me go out and make sure that I have a candle. If we have a candlelit dinner, that'll be so romantic, because you don't realize that romantic people, that they lived in caves. The poor folk, the people in apartments, a lot of them were living in caves. They weren't living like regular folk. And so when they lived in the cave, they couldn't afford to have a light on in their house. So if you could have a candle, you was really doing something. You think that that's something that has to do with the care for that somebody has for you, or the love somebody has for you. No, that's just because poor folk did that. Just like with us. Just like with us. Why are you eating that pork still? Why are you eating them pork chops? Why are you eating them chitlins like that? Because it was something that was poor folk had to do. But now you think that's what you're supposed to eat. Why do you go and you have pho? Right? Pho, pho, a Vietnamese dish. Why do you go eat the pho? Because that's all they could do. They had some tendons, had a little piece of meat here and there. They had some leaves. They had, they could make some broth. Okay, cool. They can put that together and poor folk can eat. Now you'll pay. Some people pay $30 for a bowl. Right? How you doing, old head energy? They'll pay $30 for a bowl, but that's not supposed to be for people who are making it. That's supposed to be for people who can barely make it. But now you've been enslaved so much that you look for slave meals rather than things that bless you. You used to love having vegetables all over your plate with a little bit of meat here and there. Now you're looking for stuff that's not even righteous for you to eat. As we talked about the other day, praying over food. Hey, I'm about to eat all this sugar. I'm praying that you'll cover me in all the sugar I'm about to eat. But I'm going to eat unholy, but I'm going to pray holy. That's why a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. See, you've only read that one verse, James chapter 1, verse 8. Go back to verse 5, and you will discover that if you don't live holy and you try to pray over things that are unholy, you're going to still get unholy results because you won't follow law. Because a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. If you'll pray in instability, you'll live in instability. If you'll live in instability, you'll have an unstable life. If you have an unstable life, you'll have an unstable husband. An unstable husband leads to an unstable wife. An unstable wife leads to unstable children. You don't believe me? Start reading Deuteronomy 28, start at verse 54. And keep on reading. And you'll see that instability just breeds instability. Malcolm X said it like this. If you have and how you doing, Sister Helen? Malcolm X said it like this. If you have a poor house, it's probably because you have poor parents. If you have poor parents, it's probably because they came from poor parents. If they had poor parents, they probably came from a poor community. If they came from a poor community, it means they have poor education. If they have poor education, it's because they came out of people who were poor. Those people who were poor were probably poor children, which meant they were poor people who were in a poor house. And the thing continues over and over and over again. Malcolm X, and later his disciple, believe it or not, as much as we think of him as with Elijah Muhammad, but Malcolm X, who taught Muhammad Ali, right, and was one-on-one supposed to be working with him. Muhammad Ali told you that, look, if you give people who have a great mind a ghetto, it will stop being a ghetto in a few years. But if you give people who have a ghetto mindset a rich neighborhood, it'll be a slum in 48 hours. We don't have the right mindset. We don't have the right mindset. We don't have the right thought process. We don't even care about the thought process. We're not even worried. We're not looking at the time code. The time code. See, watch this. May I also say this? This is why this year in 2023, look beyond what you see. And then we say after that, press and strain. It's going to take time for you to become great. Dr. Carter G. Woodson, before he wrote the book, The Miseducation of the American Negro, he said it took him like 20 or 30 years to get rid of his Harvard education. He couldn't write about miseducation till he got rid of what he was miseducated in and had replaced it with something else. See, when you replace the negative with the positive, when you replace with the false, the false with the truth, when you replace the ideals with the ideas, it becomes what we call deliverance. You have deconstructed the way you live in order to be able to put something else in. This is why it's hard. Somebody can get off drugs and then 6 months later they're on drugs and they were doing so well. How do they do it? Because they didn't put anything else in place. If they're still dealing with the same friends, if they're still dealing with the same family, if they're still dealing with the same mindset, then guess what? In time, they'll go right back to where they were. That's why the 3Ds, if y'all remember when we talked about the 3Ds a while ago, those who've been with us for a while, the 3Ds, you got to defeat it, destroy, and be delivered. What does that mean? David, when he saw Goliath, he went out and he got the smooth stones and everything. He believed Yah. He used a sling. First one, bam, hit him in the forehead. He fell down, dead. He's defeated. David said, I'm not taking no chances, though. He ran towards him, grabbed his own sword, the thing that he was going to try to use David. Now in David's hand was what he would use to destroy him. He cut off his head. He's destroyed. He's defeated. He's destroyed. But then what happens next? He had to be delivered. They look out, and the Philistines are there. They're scared. They start running away. But the Israelites realize if we let them run away, they can come back, and they might come back with a whole bunch of Goliaths. Who knows what they're going to come back with next time? Maybe Goliath becomes their rallying cry. Maybe he becomes, their martyr. We can't allow that. And they went and they killed as many of them as they could, chased them and killed off pretty much all of them, because we can't have it come back. Because we can't have it come back. Because we can't have it come back. You got to defeat it. You got to destroy it. And then you must be delivered. Don't focus on just, hey, I defeated it. A lot of people stop there. See, don't focus on, hey, I just destroyed it. You got to be delivered. And that's the problem in the time code. If we're going to be code breakers and become curse breakers because of it, the problem in the timeline is that we have, in fact, not realized that we never took time to be delivered. We've defeated many different things. You destroyed a whole bunch of things in your life. How you doing, Brother Elijah? But have you been delivered? Have you put something in your environment, in your community, that doesn't allow you to have to keep going back to the same mentality? That's the problem, right? That's the problem. Have you created your own schools? So once you get free from your mindset, you don't have to say, hey, I got to go right back to their college. Have you created your own schools so that you don't have to worry about, man, when I send my child? Look, I was talking to somebody the other day. We were having some in-depth conversation. They were talking about how, man, when I send my children to school, it's tough for me because I know every time I send them, a little more of what I've taught them goes away and a lot more of what they've taught them comes back. Why? Because you can't fight. Look, time code. You can't fight the time. That really blessed me when I had that conversation with that person, because you can't fight the time. You can't fight the time code. Like the time. Your child, if your child is in school as long, sometimes longer than you're at your job. Hear me, somebody. If you got to go to a 9 to 5 and your child got to be at school at 7:30 and gets off about 2:30 and then has to do a little bit of stuff after school for extracurricular stuff, and then comes back for bands, goes back for choir, goes back for arts, goes back for whatever club that they're in, goes back to make sure that they letter, goes back to make sure they do community service, goes back to make sure that they are part of the newsletter, goes back to make sure that they are in sports. If your child is spending that much time in the world, you got to comprehend. See, we don't have an environment yet that says that if they're going to go there, they're going to go there and not get what it is, right? Or we have to at least tell them, hey, when you go to school, when you go to these classes, when you go to this, look, you need to know that you're going to have to be an expert at code switching. Don't present it to them to what it really, in all honesty, it's kind of lying. But you got to be an expert at code switching. Well, what you mean code switching? Teach them code switching early. What is code switching, Mom? What is code switching, Dad? When you go to school, they're going to tell you George Washington is the first president. He is not the first president of the United States. He said he is not the first president of the United States. He said he had his favorite presidents when he was not the president of the United States. However, they're going to tell you he has to be the first president, even though Declaration of Independence is 1776. You don't have no Constitution, really, 1789, 1791. However, you're going to have to be great at code switching. So when they go there, you're going to have to say that that answer that they want is true. You're going to have to learn in their system. When they speak in lies, they speak in riddles, they speak in codes. But when we come, we're going to have to speak in truth. So you're going to have to lie. I'm going to have to teach you the timeline, and I'm going to go over your stuff with you, and I'm going to make sure that I teach you these things. But I need you to make sure. See, it's not just enough to tell your baby, hey, don't believe him, but then you don't give him nothing to believe. Put something in place of what you're saying not to believe. This is what we do to children. Hey, don't have sex. Okay, what do I do when I don't have sex? Just don't have sex. I mean, okay, but when I'm around a bunch of people who are having sex, what do I do when they're trying to have sex or trying to invite me or entice me to be part of what they're part of? You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to put something in place there. What do I do when what do I do when I'm the only one that's not going to be going to class for a couple hours because I'm not supposed to go to sex ed? And what do I learn about sex? Who do I learn about sex from? Because y'all don't talk about sex. Amen. Because the silence supports the lies, right? You got to, well, yeah, self-control, but yeah, what does that look like? See what I'm saying? And I agree with you. Self-control, cool. Let's go over self-control. Hey, because you're going to have wet dreams. If you're going to be a virgin boy, and you should, you go through a period too. See, if a woman, right, doesn't have her egg fertilized, she goes through a period. If a man doesn't have a chance to fertilize an egg, he goes through a period. We call it a wet dream. But we both go through a period. So when your urges get strong, here's some stuff you can do. Maybe you can take some ashwagandha. See, when you see, we got to let's take time out to do that. Time code. See, let's start breaking the code. Maybe you can take some ashwagandha. It'll help you. Right? Maybe you can do some stuff around the house. Maybe I'll give you more stuff around certain times, especially this week, you know, when it's been this. Hey, we'll keep up with your stuff just like we keep up with a girl's period. We'll keep up with your wet dreams. And so when you had the last one, we know that it'll be this long. We'll see how many of you have for about 3 months. We'll see where they land. Once we get once we know how often they're happening, okay, when about a week out, you're going to be having your strongest urge to do this. This is when I know that we need to come together. So I'll make sure for that week, we go out and do the stuff that you really, really like to do. How you doing, Sister Miko? See, these are things. This is deliverance now. Drink some grapefruit juice. Sure, right? Things like that. Hey, you know, we just go, hey, you're my princess. Don't do anything. Don't have anything. Don't do this or whatever. Right? But hey, what do I do when all these boys, especially like, what if I'm a girl that has no father and now all these boys are coming and saying things to me that I wish my father said? What do I have in place for that? What is our environment that we're putting together? See, ain't no boy out here gonna be able to out tell my girl, right? My little girl. Ain't nobody gonna tell her more than her daddy does that you beautiful and you amazing and you this, you that. Ain't nobody. Right? But there's an environment for that. You got to create the environment. See, we have to create an environment. You can tell them how to channel their energy by that. By the way, even teaching them things as far as, hey, like, you know, if you don't have sex right away, you know that some of that, what people try to call energy or spirit, or really just physical essence to a certain degree, but some of that stuff will actually go back to the brain. So a lot of you losing brain power because you always having your seed on the ground. Teach them what marriage really is. You know, sex is marriage, marriage is sex. You know, when two become one, they become one even physically. DNA swaps. You start carrying somebody else's DNA. Great time of fasting and prayer, sure, right? But that's all I'm saying. Whatever it's going to be. See, we get really big on just saying don't have sex. But there's a time code. There's only a matter of time before, if you don't tell me how to deal with these physical urges, I'm going to start doing. Matter of fact, it's only a matter of time that I'm going to have my puberty. See, watch this. Some of your children haven't entered into puberty yet. It's only a matter of time, and you still haven't told them anything about what's coming. But you know your school is already teaching them about sex. Heck, if you know about the BLM pyramid, the Black Lives Matter pyramid, you will discover very quickly that they teach them about LGBTQ stuff, including sexual activity, now in kindergarten and stuff. Depending on what state you're in, a lot of states, if not all states, just about, but a lot of states, any of them that do the BLM pyramid, they have versions for pre-K, kindergarten, elementary, junior high school, college. They have a BLM week, and they will teach you, because this is the BLM pyramid. The BLM pyramid, it will say stuff. It'll say stuff like this, right? It doesn't even really mention black by name, except for 4 out of the 13 principles or whatever it is. They might make it lesser depending on what age range you're in. But then when they get to the 4, they'll be like, it'll say black women. Then it'll say black women should be protected and upheld. However, there are many types of women, and they start talking about something completely different. It'll say black families are just like all families, and there are special types of families and that are blended in ways that we haven't been taught about, and they teach them about something else, right? I'm not saying that you can't talk about LGBTQ plus at all. I'm saying that you might think that somebody's doing something and you don't even realize what they're actually doing. There's an agenda to it. I don't like it with anybody, whether it's LGBTQ plus or somebody else. I don't like it when people do blackface, and Black Lives Matter is blackface. More white agenda has been settled, more LGBTQ plus stuff, which, by the way, I know there are black people that are LGBTQ plus, I get it, but more of that stuff has been handled more than our own. See, there's a time. See, but we got to realize this. The March on Washington was supposed to be a grassroots movement. Martin Luther King Jr. had originally nothing to do with the March on Washington. Malcolm X taught us that. Right? I'm not one of these people who said we shouldn't listen to Martin at all either, but I'm just giving you facts. Martin was used and didn't even realize it. He realized to a certain extent, but he also felt he had to be. Why? Because what was going to happen was black people from all over the nation were coming upon Washington, D.C., and they were ready to bust open windows. They already had codes that they were going to write on certain places, be like, hey, these people are with us, these people aren't. They were ready to wax everything. Like when you look at what happened in Baltimore, and Baltimore stuff was getting waxed and everything because they kept to the program a little bit. But like they were ready to wax everything, mess up everything. Everything was going down. People were going to be laying on the runways so the planes couldn't take off. All this stuff. They were coming straight to cause chaos. All of a sudden, just like the Rothschilds will do, all of a sudden, just like JP Morgan does, all of a sudden, just like these 5 families do and all the stuff you talk about, somebody found out about it. They sent word to JFK. They said, you need to handle this. JFK said, okay, Martin Luther King Jr., that's kind of the standard for them, and he wants peace. He's going by the Gandhi thing. He wants peace. Let's see if we can talk to him about it and see if he can get involved. They told him, look, Martin, we're just going to be real with you. We know what they're coming to do, and if they do this, you know our nature. We're going to kill them. At the end of the day, we don't even necessarily want to kill them because it looks bad for us. If we just be honest, forget all the nice stuff. It looks bad for us if we kill these folks, but we're going to kill your people. They're coming looking for this. We're going to kill them. We're just letting you know. You might want to get involved in this. He basically said, look, man, I didn't start this. I'm not even involved. They said, no problem. We got it set up. We will get you involved. He said, look, man, we're running low. You guys been messing with our money and stuff too. I mean, you've been messing with us like you messing with them. They said, no problem. We got this man. He'll pay you guys. It was called the Big Six. Go look up who the Big Six are with MLK. They said, we'll take care of all you guys' expenses and stuff. We'll give you guys things, and y'all can try and get this stuff later down the road. But I'm just letting you know right now, if y'all try to get it today or this time frame, they trying to get it, we will kill them. And Martin made a decision. Do I want to see a bunch of my people killed? Or, hey, can we get some money and try and do it later down the road? It's a tough decision when you're in somebody. Once again, if you have to ask your enemy for help, you're in bad shape. Martin made a decision. You can say it was wrong. You say it right. He made a decision. And he decided to be part of it. And all of a sudden, it turned into we coming to tear it up to it's going to be the March on Washington that's remembered for peace. And even when he did the March on Washington on his way, guess what he said? He said, we're coming looking for our check. So he didn't forget what the original movement was. But all we remember is free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. But you weren't even free when you did it. But if you notice, he was speaking in code. Matter of fact, that was not his original speech. Y'all know that? He was speaking something else. And because it had been so long and stuff like that, people were kind of done and tired. They didn't want to listen to Martin. Right? Like they had a whole bunch of speakers that day. And so people were kind of tired. We've been standing here all day. Some of us haven't really ate all day. Okay, like, all right, Martin, whatever. They're trying. And then it was actually a singer named Mahalia Jackson. How you doing, Sister Keita? Akita? It was actually a famous singer. If y'all know about Mahalia, learn about Mahalia. She's kind of the beginning of what y'all think of as gospel music and stuff today, right? But Mahalia Jackson, she knows her audience. She knows how to get people up for stuff. She knows how the spirit moves, so to speak, in church and all that stuff, right? And she saw he was losing the crowd. How you doing, blah, blah, bless? So she said what? She said, tell him about the dream, Martin. You know why she said it? She said it because, and how you doing, Samantha, if I didn't say this already? She said it because she had heard him give the speech about the dream. He had already given it before. So she had heard it, right? Just like many of us preachers, we repeat ourselves a lot. She had heard him say that. So she yelled out, tell him about the dream, Martin. Tell him about the dream. You can even, some people say on certain recordings, you can even hear it in the background, her saying, tell him about the dream. So he pauses and then he starts talking about, hey, I've been to the mountain top, I've seen the other side and all those stuff like that, because he had actually had a vision of it. But in that, she felt in her spirit, switch it up. Once again, a powerful sister, right? A divine sister, secure in who she is, and us looking up to her and protecting her and where she is in her feminine divine beauty, speaking a word, supporting a man. And all you remember is the man, and you don't know about the woman, right? That's how a lot of this stuff works, right? The time code in that too. We don't even see the sisters in our time code, But so it's hard for break the code off of misogyny and what people are trying to say that we're involved in as far as patriarchy and all this. But in our culture, there's many times where it's been the sister who said, even if you didn't see her, she was the one that made sure, right? Like a lot of people don't know. People, whether you were Black, Muslim, Christian, you hated Black people, you hated white people, all this stuff. You were Christian, you were not, all this stuff. Whatever you were, there was a place down south. There was a sister. She had a restaurant, very famous restaurant. And whenever you came in there, you could not argue. How you doing, Rocky? You could not argue. If you went to a restaurant, you were not allowed to argue. So a lot of places that business got done were at her place because you couldn't argue. And her food was so great, it was like food that people knew brought them together. So it was like once you ate the food, you didn't even want to argue. But if you came there, that was the rule. You could not argue. It was a sister that said, in here, you will not do that. She caused a whole bunch of great things to happen. So over and over again, of course, I didn't even talk about when we talk about Moses. Forgive me all for this. Of course, Harriet Tubman. And we only talk about Harriet Tubman on the Underground Railroad. We forget that Harriet Tubman, even though they never gave her an official title, she was a general. Like, during the Civil War, she would actually go out in front of Black troops and would rescue, once they would beat the other side, they would rescue all the slaves and bring them back. We just think about her. Oh yeah, she had 100 and something, whatever people that she freed. Oh yeah, she did that. But there's some other stuff she did too. And on her land, even though she couldn't read that well or write that well, or some people say at all, she somehow made sure she got land and allowed people of all color, of all beliefs, to be able to come on there and even put a hospital together because people couldn't afford to go to hospitals. Right? That's timeline. But in our mind, oh yeah, the first general, oh, this Black woman, a few years ago, whatever, wow, first woman to do that. No. Like in our timeline, like what people are just now starting to label as misogyny and patriarchy, in our timeline, we didn't bow down to that. Even in the ghetto, right? And by the way, I don't think about it this way either, because a lot of times we think about the ghetto as being modern Black slums, and then we think about the ghetto coming from Jewish people who went through what they were put in. You know why they called them ghettos? Because they started calling themselves Jews. And so Hitler, because he didn't believe they were the Jews, remember, Hitler said that the Jews were Black. He knew about Sephardic Jews, right? I'm not saying Hitler's a great man to go to. I'm just telling you off of the stuff that we went through. We can see people in the timeline and know who we are, right? And so he called the Jews out of disrespect to them. But the reality is that they called the Sephardic Jews, the Black Jews that they talked about, these books that we looked at earlier from the 1600s and 1800s and all this stuff, where they said what we looked like in those times and hundreds of years before they wrote the books, right? They put them in what was called ghettos. Now, also on the timeline, are you aware that what you think is the KKK uniform, the white hood that points straight up with the eyes cut out, or sometimes they will wear where you can see their faces, and then you had a cross on there. You think that that is a modern American thing, right? How you doing, Sister Michelle? Sorry for not seeing you. You think that's a modern American thing. Thank you for the compliment, Stephanie. Right? But no, that's something that the Roman Catholics wore in Spain and in Portugal during the Inquisition when they came and they got Sephardic Jews, when they were looking for you to make you either to make you to either kill you or take your children, sell you into slavery, and then make you convert to Roman Catholicism. That's the uniform they wore, you know. Yeah, it looks similar to the popes or those who were in the Vatican or a cardinal or something. But you see that, you think that that's KKK because in the time code you don't realize the KKK copied off of the people who came against the Negroes or the Sephardic Jews. In your mind, because we don't know the code, we think that the code just means they don't like Negroes, not realizing the first people called Negroes in more modern times are going to be the Israelites, who the people of Spain and Portugal and the Roman Catholic Church were trying to convert to Roman Catholicism and told them no longer have your customs and traditions, and they cut you off of yourself. They cut your children off from themselves, and anybody who ever dared to be you again, when they saw you, literally, they had tools. You know, they had torture tools, right? They had something that looks kind of like a pyramid, and they would put you on top of it. And they would either put it through, and forgive me, this is going to be very vile, and it's going to be very disgusting. So if you want to cut off for about 20, 30 seconds, I get it. I'm just giving you a heads up, okay? But I'm just going to be honest with you. If you want to come back in 30 seconds, so, but this will probably upset you. You know, they had pyramid looking things, and they would put it either through they would sit you on top of it either through the anus or through the vagina. And they would basically put some weights on the side of you, on your ankles, basically. And they would be having your body hanging, you know, over top, and slowly would let the weight just start coming down. And they would torture you. And they say, are you going to stop being an Israelite? Are you going to stop believing in the Most High? Are you going to stop carrying these customs and traditions? Are you going to stop it? Are you going to stop it? And eventually, most people would give out and just say, okay, I'll be a Roman Catholic. And then once you became a Roman Catholic, they sold you into slavery as a Negro. But you were a Negro that had given up who you were. And from that point on, anybody that came out of you, and they saw you do that, or you went through that or whatever, do you think that you were going to teach them to put the Most High first? No, you weren't, because in your mind, putting the Most High first meant that your children would have to die. They literally called it a Hebrew, they literally called it a Hebrew instrument of torture, because they only used it on you. I mean, if somebody got out of pocket, or to be honest, there were people by the colonial social construct that were white that converted to what we were in. And so they themselves would go through it as well. Give credit where credit's due, because they can be grafted in, right? And they went through it too. But it's the same thing we're going through today. See, they want to put you on a very slippery slope. They want to put some weight on you. They want to put some pressure on you. And they put you on this thing of torture. And they say, are you going to give in? Are you going to give in? Are you going to give in? Like, let us be honest. As much, somebody kind of emboldened me yesterday when I talked to him about this. So let us be honest. Slavery was not a choice, so to speak, especially for those who were trained generations after to never, to that this is just the way it is. And if you don't do it, you'll die. So it was not a choice for many. And those who chose to become slaves and not kill themselves or something like that, they chose to do that because they wanted us to live, right? However, we got to be honest, right? And we got to be honest about the torture part too. Torturing somebody means a lot of people are going to sign off on stuff that they literally physically, they just can't put mind over matter. Like that's really hard. If I were to waterboard you long enough, you might say whatever I want you to say. You know what I'm saying? If I were to do something devious like that to you, you might do whatever I say. If I were to tell you, people get that all the time. If I say I'm going to give you bad grades if you don't do this and that, or write this answer down, even if you know it to be false, you'll write it down because you feel like everybody's telling you got to do that, right? And hello, how you doing, Sister Katie? At the same time, how you doing, Sister Denise? At the same time, though, let's be honest. Like, when you hear people say this, there is a place to be able to say a lot of people just gave up on who they were to be able to live. And I get it. It's a hard conversation to have because we make it political. People believe that Kanye's with Trump, especially at the time. So therefore, since Kanye makes the comments he does, then we can't listen to it at all. And then Waka Flocka and other people take it to a level where it's ridiculous, where they're like, yeah, throw me off the ship. But it's like, if they threw you off the ship, bro, you wouldn't be, if they threw you off the ship, you wouldn't be here. I don't think you get the correlation, right? But there is something too that they force us into a place. See, it might not be a place we wanted, but they forced us into a place where we thought that cowardice was the way. We don't believe that the truth is the way. We believe that cowardice is the way. Right? Like right now, if somebody were to say, hey, if you do this, we'll put you in prison. Forget that. Some of us can't even take that. Right? Let's make it small. Some of us will not even tell the truth because we know that if we tell the truth, they'll take your platform. They'll cut you off Facebook. They'll cut you off TikTok. They'll cut you off YouTube. They'll take away your podcast. They'll take away your IG. They'll take away your Twitter account. So you just say, I'd rather not tell the truth. They force you into a place where you believe that cowardice is the way. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be aware of how the cowardice came to be. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be empathetic. I'm saying that they force us into a place to believe that we were conquered. And conquered folk don't act like more than conquerors, right? Conquered folk don't act like free folk. They put us in a position. Amen. Facts, Sister Mary, right? They put us in a position. And Shalom Gateway, how you doing? They put us in a position to where we believe that not being ourselves is more. There's more weight. There's more glory to not being you than there is being you. Right? If you don't believe so, we believe. Hear this now. We believe, and I see you, Minister Shante, yeah, Joshua chapter 1, 6, 7, and 9 for sure, right? It was maybe come around to that in a second, but please read those verses if you get a chance. We have a belief system. Now, I'm not saying us because we haven't been led as we believe. We're not going to do that as SOC. But us as a diaspora, we've been put in this position to where we say, hey, well, if I got to cut my hair, I'll do it if you'll pay me. If I got to make sure I code switch, I do not speak like my people, so be it. As long as you make sure that I'll survive. Right? Once again, if I got to go to my enemy because I'm in bad shape, right? Or I'm sorry, if I got to go to my enemy for help, I'm in bad shape. Right? We have the belief system that says, I will go forth in right, like I will bow down to feminism even if I know that womanism is better. Because it's better, right? We have a belief system that, hey, if my children should know that they're male or female, but the only option I have is school, I'll let them go to a place where they say that they don't have an identity as far as gender, even though gender literally is like a genre, or gender is like a genre literally meaning that every culture has its own style concerning its people. But I'll send them somewhere, and I'll even begin to start making excuses for it because I don't want to feel guilty. So in order to deal with the cognitive dissonance that I know that this is not my culture, but at the same time, I have to fit into their culture, and I don't want to, in their culture, be called a reverse racist or somebody who's a bigot or somebody who's a hater or somebody who doesn't love people. So I will change the standard that I'm supposed to be under, and I'll leave from under that, and I'll understand or stand under somebody else's umbrella. See, all this stuff is time. It's time code. It's we're talking about the time code and trying to be code breakers. They've been doing the same thing for generations. I'll change my, you know how many, like even with my family, right? My culture, my people, we always knew that we were Kofi. They always knew I was Kofi, but I was supposed to go out and use a fake name or a name that wasn't actually mine when I went to school or I talked to other people or I went to preach or whatever. They, like, a lot of people tell me use the American name. A lot of y'all don't even know this. You know why you use American names or what we call Americanized names or English names or British names or European names or whatever you want to call it. You know why you use those things? Because people still do that to today. When you come from immigrants don't really want you to bring your culture out. They don't want you to even learn your languages. A lot of people don't even learn their languages from their own families that speak the language. They will not speak it in front of the children sometimes because they'd rather make sure that the children fit in and have as little to do as possible. right? Well, no, they were well. I'll see if I can remember that in a second. But people be talking about, oh yeah, just go back to Africa. Everything's gonna be better when you go back to Africa. Go back to Africa, and you will discover that they messed up too. They were colonized too. They were enslaved too. Or the children were refused to speak it because they don't fit in the school and stuff. They don't like it, right? But here's the deal. And sometimes, to be honest, there's some parents that are so bad towards their children would rather not speak the language their parents do because they don't like the parents. It can be a lot of different stuff. I'm getting into psychology a little bit, So when we deal with this, if you go over to Africa, we just have this belief, oh, you go over there and just everything's exactly the way it's supposed to be. No, it's not. No, it is not. Right? And in truth, they'll tell you that, but you got to tell them first. You got to let them know that you know their culture, or if you don't know it already, you got to let them know that you know this and you know this and you know this, and they'll open up and they'll start admitting, yeah, we kind of do have this problem and this issue and stuff. But what you'll discover is you're giving your African names, you're giving your Israelite names and stuff while you're over there. But once you get Roman Catholic christened, or once you become older and get baptized, they give you a Christian name, right? Which basically just means a European name. That's all they're really saying. They give you a European version of your name, right? But they give you a Christian name. And when you get a Christian name, a lot of people over there say that's the name they want to go by for the rest of their life. They literally separate from their culture. This is a timeline that has been going on for centuries. You change the name of a slave. If you want to enslave somebody, you got to change the name. If somebody still has their same name, the word name is Shem, or is authority. It literally means if I change your name, then I change your authority. So if you still walking around with your same name, that's why that Kunta Kinte scene is so important. For those of you who sing Roots, your name is Toby. No, it's Kunta. What's your name? Say your name. Say your name. That's what they did to Kyrie Irving. Say your name. No, man, I'm an Israelite. Say your name. Right? That's what that's been there. And when you see the code, you'll see that that's all it was. It was the same code. You said the kingdom is here. The kingdom's here. Sure. So our Father, Abba, who art in heaven, Shamayam, hallowed be thy name. You're holy. Allah. Thy kingdom come. Hakodashi. Right? Ladah, come. And thy will be done on earth the same way it is in heaven. So if his will is not being done on earth, then we're supposed to establish the kingdom on earth. So we could easily just see, it's a time code. It's the same code that people are giving us. Hey, don't pay attention to what's going on around you. Pay no attention to the man behind, right? Pay attention to the big face there, but pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Wizard of Oz, right? Pay no attention to the man that's behind the curtain. Hey, Greek, do you know that the Romans, the Senate, they used to kill each other? You think that Rome was the thing that we get the pinnacle? Yeah, Rome, they used to kill each other. Don't forget Julius Caesar, where he was stabbed. He was stabbed at a Senate meeting. Was he not? Right? Don't forget, you guys don't know that the plebs and the governors and the magistrates, and I'm forgetting the one I'm really looking for, the councils and all that stuff. They used to have people who would walk with them. They would hire gangs, and the gangs would run around. They would have knife fights and gang fights in between coming together and having Congress before having session together. They hired people. Right? They hired people to do this stuff. Well, guess what? The Senate does the same thing. Don't forget that the president set precedents for your country. For those of you who still consider yourself to be Americans, don't forget that the president was the one that flooded the streets with crack cocaine. They say never forget September 11th. Never forget that up into the 80s in black homes, what we call black by the colonial construct, in black homes, over 50% of our families up into the 1980s, even with all this wild stuff happening to us, over 50% of black homes had the mother and the father in the home. Over 50% of our homes still. Until the 1980s, it took the crack epidemic. Who started it? Ronald Reagan. Remember, Ronald Reagan They knew he was going to do the Iran-Contra thing. They knew he was. When he was running for president and talking about make America great again, that's the first time it was make America great again. Y'all think it was just Trump. See, once again, you don't know the time code, the timeline. They were already talking about make America great again with Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan got invited basically to run for president because he was killing off the Black Panthers and doing stuff to Black folks so well. They were like, you need to run this country. Legit. For real, for real. That's what got him his mark. Never forget, even Clinton. Clinton, that's why the super predator thing was easier, so real for him. He had to act upon it because remember, nobody wanted to vote for who was the guy that nobody really liked, Quayle. Nobody wanted to vote for Quayle. Nobody wanted to vote for Perot, right? Ross Perot, the billionaire that was running. They didn't want them running. Ross Perot, by the way, was crazy enough. He probably would have broke a lot of the stuff off just because he was going. Y'all think? See, a lot of people think that Trump wanted to make sure life was easy. Ross Perot was about to give y'all the game. You know, like that's why I know they weren't going to let Ross Perot win. Ross Perot could have bought his way in the presidency to a certain extent, but they were not going to let him change the game up. But anyways, I'll leave that alone because I'm not Republican, Democrat anyways. But I'm just trying to give, like, when you look at this stuff and you start reading the timeline, you start seeing they do the same thing. But anyways, Ronald Reagan, he was killing all Black folks so well and making poor people so bad, they wanted Reaganomics to come into being, where he was going to support corporations. He was going to take care of the big guy, not the little guy. So Ronald Reagan, right? He was running, but remember Bill Clinton, they didn't like him. That's where I was. Thank you, Holy Spirit. Sorry about that, y'all. I'm back. Bill Clinton, they thought he wasn't strong enough on crime. Republicans and Democrats and everybody else really wanted to vote for him. Remember, he won in a landslide, really. But they really wanted to vote for him, but they still were like, oh, you're not tough enough on these darkies. You know, they'd be doing stuff. So he went back to Arkansas. There was a guy that was there, a Black man, who shouldn't have been on death row and was somebody that had mental health issues, very autistic, probably acted like a little child, right? I don't know for sure from reading up on it, but probably was very childlike in his behavior and probably didn't do what they said, right? He went back and told them, hey, kill him. Because he's still the governor of Arkansas. He said, hey, kill him off for me real quick. They killed him. Right. And then once they killed him, he went back on the trail and now everybody said, hey, he's going to take care of crime. Right. And then that's what led to what? Super predators. His wife got together with the help of Joe Biden to make that work, too. Remember, his wife worked for a company that Martin Luther King Jr.'s wife, Coretta Scott King, she told us anybody that comes out of that company, don't trust them because they're racist and they hate us. Hillary Clinton used to be a lawyer for that company. She gets together with Joe Biden. They come up with something to help Bill Clinton. And now all of a sudden the super predator bill goes forth. And guess what? It was not just only white people that supported it, but it was a lot of our people who supported it. Because what did we do? In the land of our captivity, you are captivated by them. Right? And hey, how you doing, Sister Bree? I tried to reach out and see how you were doing. Hopefully you got the messages. But right? Excuse me. In the land of our captivity, we all over the place. Oh, wow. I haven't seen that one before. Thank you for the love. Appreciate it. In the land of our captivity, we still in Stockholm Syndrome. So we signed off on it. So going back to Reagan ran on Make America Great Again. And they knew that he wanted to help the Contras because the Contras had lost. And the people who won, they were going to set up something for their people, just like what happened in Grenada. Just what happened in Grenada. And Grenada, same thing. We had our own people doing our own thing, making our own stuff, teaching our own people, making our own schools. Hey, how you doing, Critical Thinking? Thanks for being on, right? Making our own schools, all this. We were doing stuff for ourselves. And then what did he do? He said, no, we need you guys to be more like what we want you to be. And so they messed up Grenada and came over there in a matter of days. Everything was tore up, killed people, killed off the leadership, and make sure that they got rid of the hospitals and the schools. Same thing happened over with what was going on with Contra. It's called Iran-Contra. Why? Because they already knew. They made a law, by the way, while he was running, talking about Make America Great Again. The Senate already knew that he was going to try and do that. Right? So Congress already knew, the Senate and the House of Representatives. So they actually made laws specifically saying that he could not go and help the Contras. They had already made, by the time he became president, they had already put into law, you cannot help the Contras. They had already made laws because they knew what he was going to do, right? And so what did he do? I'm going to go over to Iran. We're gonna work with them. We got to get these troops back and stuff. If they'll work with us, we'll placate them. We'll make Muhammad Ali go over there. We'll have Jesse Jackson go over there, and we'll tell you guys, see, black folk, you guys are doing these amazing things. Look, America, we're so progressive, and black people are helping us. Meanwhile, while they're doing it as a front, we're just gonna go ahead and do some business with them. We're gonna give them some stuff like that, and then we'll do some drug business, all that stuff, and we'll even make sure that we turn that into now. We'll start selling and we'll start being able to give weapons rather to the Contras so that they can win, so that we can put them in place. Now, how are we going to be able to do this? How does this work? Well, we need money for it. Well, where do we get the money from? I know we'll sell drugs. Well, we already allow drugs kind of sort of to come in anyways. We get paid under the table to let this stuff come in anyways. Yeah, but why don't we're missing some people. Black people ain't really buying some of the drugs. I mean, they buy weed and everything, but they can't really buy, cocaine. Cocaine's more expensive. Let's sell them cocaine. They say, no, they can't really afford cocaine. We've already messed them up too much. They can't really afford cocaine. He goes, well, y'all got to figure it out, but y'all need to do this. So people get on it. CIA, FBI, all these people work together in the government. They come together and they go, oh, okay, well, we can water it down. We'll make it crack cocaine. We'll cook it up. We'll put some chemicals on it. And we'll make it cheap enough that they can afford. And they had to keep working on it because at first it wasn't cheap enough. Still couldn't afford it. $50 for a rock is too much for a lot of people. $20 for a rock was too much, but you start getting the $15, $10 rocks. There was one guy in LA, he got arrested. He got it down to where they were cooking it down to where they were selling $2 rocks. They got it down where they were selling $2 rocks. You could destroy your life for $2. And it's not even natural cocaine. See, if you get natural, I'm not suggesting you do drugs, by the way, right? I got to make that clear. However, if you do some research, if you get natural cocaine and you sniff it, it's like sniffing air. You won't even know you sniffed anything. In its nature, in its natural sense, at its purest sense, you don't even know that you're actually having cocaine. You could literally sniff it and not even know. Like, that's how crazy it is when something's in its nature, right? But no, they put it to where that thing was going to be as crazy for you, as harmful for you, as disgusting for you. That's why you have certain people who are on cocaine and take cocaine their whole life, and they still live long lives, and it seems like nothing's wrong with them because they get it in its purest sense. That's not what they gave you. They want it to be like, oh, well, we get even in that, they want you to believe they gave you, hey, it's nothing wrong. Like, we had to go through cocaine, and no, you went through cocaine, bro. Yeah, for educational purposes only. Thank you. For educational purposes. No, you went through cocaine. They put crack in the streets and waved the American flag while they did it. And then had the audacity. This is where it gets wild. Nancy Reagan, his wife, who was giving blowjobs to everybody. Real talk. Go look it up. Not even making that up. Nancy Reagan, who's out here literally like sexually active and promiscuous, comes in front of y'all and goes to your children's schools, came to our schools, and talking about say no to drugs. Who in the world do you think you are? See, but we don't know the time. We don't know the time code. We don't know this is something repeating itself over and over again. They had Trump run for office, right? Off of the same thing, make America great again. Put his wife out there who you knew was sexually promiscuous and all that, and knew she was just there for the money, had her give the same speeches that they wrote for Michelle Obama, which they got from Michelle Obama's speeches from others too. Don't get it twisted. Just like Barack Obama's speeches were written from Bush and from other people too. They were repeating the same narrative. Y'all just said, oh, well, if a Republican says it, we should agree. If a Democrat says it, we should agree, because that's how messed up they got us. Right? But they had her in office, the same thing, and then come and talking about reading books for your children. Once your children get to be about an age when they start getting on your computers, because a lot of us don't make sure we secure that stuff, they're going to get on those computers and they're going to look and they're going to be like, wasn't that the first lady butt naked? I'm just saying, right? Like, we are in a position where we don't realize how tough it is. So Ronald Reagan, he starts doing that stuff to make money. He uses us and starts killing us off and has us killing each other off for a corner or for a city or for a street or whatever, to be able to make sure that we made money. Then they turned around, put all of you guys in prison, and had Clinton say 3 strikes and you're out. And once they finished doing that, by the way, they took away your habeas corpus during that. That meant that even when they did you dirty, if you found that they did you dirty and tried to bring it up in front of the judge again, guess what? If you brought it in front of the judge again, guess what they were going to say? They were going to tell you, Yeah, just say no, right, Sister Bree? Right? That's what they said. Just say no, right? Guess what they were going to tell you? If you found out they did you dirty, they say, well, hey, look, we changed it to where your constitutional rights don't even matter anymore. They didn't change the Constitution. They told you couldn't use the very Constitution that they say is for everybody. Yeah, I remember the DARE program. I never really got big in the DARE program. Amen. We better educate, right? This is the missing. See, how do we break a code when we don't even take time to break the code? This is the time code. We don't see it repeating itself. They're literally doing the same thing over and over again. Nixon was killing us too. JFK wrote in his journal and said that Hitler should be remembered as a genius as time goes on. Why would he say that? Because his father, who made him the president, Jack Kennedy, who came from the family that was bootlegging and got their money and then went into Congress and then had it to where people couldn't go to war at first in World War II because he was a Nazi sympathizer. His father wouldn't let us go to war, or if you call yourself American, I was in the United States military, so it slips up us every once in a while, but wouldn't let Americans go to war. Wouldn't let Americans go to war. Filibustered and help people to fill, watch this, Madison Square Garden. Madison Square Garden filled. You can go look up videos where Madison Square Garden, New York, right there, 5 boroughs, y'all. Go to New York, New York. Madison Square Garden, supposed to be the Mecca and all that stuff. Well, guess what happened in the Mecca? In the Mecca, guess what happened? They had Nazi filled, by the way. They had Nazi parties. They had Nazi speeches. They had Nazi programs right in New York City. And the police, now people say, well, the police were just there to keep the peace. No, the police officers were paid to be there to ensure that if anybody acted up, they'd be taken care of. By the way, if you look at some of these videos, you'll have people who will be against this stuff going on. White people, if we want to use the social construct. And they will come and fight, try to fight against it, or try to just even sometimes just speak. Hey, we shouldn't be doing this. Why are we doing this? Why are we saying this stuff? Why are we allowing this? And then the cops come and take them out as people beat them up as the cops drag them out to probably be beat up more and hopefully survive the beating enough to be able to drag themselves home. It's repeating itself. It's repeating itself. But see, in your mind, JFK and RFK are your friends because RFK got shot and JFK got shot. So they must be our friend. The time code, you don't know how it goes. How did they treat Negroes? What is an original Negro? What did they call Negroes when they started selling us into slavery? Who were the Negroes? Were they Israelites? You see that? Like, you put this stuff together in the timeline. You said you tried to make a TikTok show the similarities between the American military and the Yazis. Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I guess I'm technically not supposed to say that. Right? But I'm just saying, you got to be in a position to realize what's going on with you and going on with your people. They literally have this stuff going on against us, and we don't even recognize it. We don't think to recognize it. We don't think about having the reality of it. We don't think that it's necessary to know. We've been told that if we say anything about it, that we're the racists or the reverse racists or we're the bigots. No, we're not. We're telling the truth. See, now it's not a question of especially those of us who've been with this whole series so far, it's not a question anymore as far as, are we speaking the code? Is the code necessary? Do we need to learn it? Now it's a question of, will you speak it? And will you make it something that you do? See, be hearers of the word is one thing, but to be hearers and doers simultaneously, that's a whole nother level. Baffled by the last 4 letters. Might be something there. And see, even with that, if we be honest, I won't even go there because I don't know if I'm even equipped enough to go there as of yet. And thank you for the love. But watch this. What about the fact that things that you use for peace are things that other people use for war? Time is now. Amen. What about that? Because a swastika is a sign of peace originally. Remember, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, origins, kingdom origins. We don't know the original. Swastika is originally a place for peace, or a sign for peace, excuse me, a symbol for peace. Why do you only think about it as war? Because even though we know it's evil, the only way we can think about it is through a white prism. If you saw a black person or person of color wearing a swastika, you'd lose your mind, wouldn't you? I heard somebody yell at me because I was wearing a German shirt that my grandfather, who was a World War II veteran, he gave me. It wasn't a Nazi shirt; it was a German shirt. And this person got on the bus and started cooking me up and frying me and saying I was German, or I was a Nazi. I was like, no, there's like, but we don't know enough about culture. But I get it though, right? Because I get at least he's trying to be like, hey, you wearing these people stuff, this, that, or whatever. I get it, right? But we don't know how the time code works. We don't know how to put stuff in its place. We don't know the origin of these things, right? But we're running out of time. That's part of the code. We already showed you the 1,260 years. We already talked about the beast. We already talked about the 10 horns. We already talked about the 3 that were plucked out, the 7 that are left over, the 1 big horn that's still here. Like, this stuff has been hitting over and over and over again. We showed you books today that you could be able to go look at. We told you what it was, when these books were written. They weren't even written in modern times. We've shown you videos on TikTok and other platforms where you can, and even told you where to go, where you can legit look at what Israel looked like just in the 1920s. By the way, I didn't use this quote today, but we talked about it prior, that remember, Israel, during what is it, the 5-day war, 6-day war, 7-day war, I don't know, whatever it was, and they won with the help of United States, the Allied powers, United States, Britain, France, and Russia, and they were able to make the Berlin Wall, separate Germany as well, and then into East and West Germany, and then even do the what was that, and then even do well, and give Israel to who people call Israelites today. When they won that war, time code, right? The time code today, right? When they won that war, what happened? When they won that war, they went to Kemet, or what we now call Egypt. And that's not even the Kemetic people that are over Egypt now, but nevertheless, they went to Egypt and they went to the prime minister. They said, hey, we need you to recognize us as sovereign. Why? Because every time somebody's going to become a sovereign nation, somebody else has to give you sovereignty. Authority goes downhill, right? So before you call yourself pastor, preacher, teacher, halat, minister, president, mayor, etc., you have to be authorized by somebody to do so, right? How you doing? I'm sorry, you said it's fairly easy to find the truth with just a little diligence. Amen. Amen. Be diligent, be faithful, be obedient, even to your studying. Amen. That's a great point. Right. So this place they went to the Egyptian prime minister and they said, well, we want you to recognize as a sovereign nation. He said, no, we won't recognize you as a sovereign nation. They got indignant, they got mad, upset. Why won't you recognize us as a sovereign nation? He said, well, when you left, you were black. And now that you come back, you were white. What does that mean? When you were Israelites before, you were black people. You were people we recognized as black. Now that you come back, you're totally white. You can't be the same people. That's what he said. Now, I'm just giving you stuff on a timeline, a time code. See, all this stuff, it goes together. Why is it that when somebody gives you a piece of the time code, they say, no, this is why. There's something called empirical data. Empirical data. Now, they're going to tell you that I'm wrong in this definition, but I just want you to think proper etymology and how they change the code. They can change a letter, and before you know it, you think that they're speaking a whole nother language. No, right? Etymology will help you. Even the sounding of words, we call it phonetic sounds, right? We as Phoenicians, phonetics, right? Phonetic sounds. You said your grandmother was a German soldier in World War II also? Big up. Okay, that's what's up, right? I wouldn't say my grandfather was a German. He fought with Germans. He was an American soldier in World War II on my mother's side. He fought in World War II, but he did fight, but he gave me a shirt that somebody had from there. But anyways, but thank you for you. I'm thankful for her service. But what I was trying to get at is, I lost where we were. Oh, empirical data. Empirical data is nothing more than data that the empire. Empirical data is nothing more than what the empire did, or is data that the empire says is real. That's it. When you hear, and look, I like some of the stuff Jordan Peterson says. I don't like some of the stuff Jordan Peterson says. But when you hear Jordan Peterson, for those guys who like to listen to him, or even our sisters who like to listen to him as well, look, if you hear Jordan Peterson talk and he starts talking about empirical data is code. It is code for if the empire says it's data, then it's data. Well, thank you for the compliment, nevertheless, right? If the empire says it's data, then it's data. That's what empirical data means. So if the empire tells you E equals MC squared, even when it's not, you believe what the empire says. If the empire tells you that there's not only protons and electrons, which we can see and which we can verify, but they also tell you there are neutrons, which you've never seen and cannot be verified and are totally hyper theoretical, you believe it and you write it down as is a fact. If the empire tells you that colorism and slavery is something that George Washington is against, you believe them, even though George Washington's wife was labeled as a brunette. Now, if you know what a brunette is originally, and back then, because even in the 1800s, it's still defined as it. So in the 1700s, it obviously was still defined as it, until they changed the code. But if you look up what a brunette is, brunette en français, or brun en anglais, in other words, brun, which is French, in English means brown, which means that George Washington's wife passed for white. She passed. King George, his wife, didn't pass. She was known as an African, which means that because all of their children, except for 2 of them, survived, which was a big deal. That they had like 13 children, 11 survived, and 11 of them either became the king of Britain or became royalty, a king or queen somewhere else. So there is no royal family that does not have African blood. Both King George and George Washington were really good friends, really great friends, and they both had wives that had black blood in them, showing you once again that colorism is a mighty thing to make somebody say, I'll own my own people to make sure that I fit in. Matter of fact, George Washington, when he married his wife, Martha, he said he married her because she had as many slaves as he did. That was one of the reasons he said that she was suitable for marriage. Wow. But George Washington, who would allow overseers to beat black N-word females because they wouldn't have called them women back then. But George Washington, who allowed the overseers to whip black female N-words, and they would have them whip them again, then the overseer would come and tell him, he would said, you did the right thing. Right. The one who pulled teeth out of his slave's mouth with the help of his dentist so that they could form his dentures before they finally were able to get to those ivory dentures y'all talk so much about. The same George Washington that knew that you were Israel and used Moors to be able to build Washington, D.C., like Benjamin Banneker, and use Moors or even natives to be able to help them to cross rivers like he did in New York and did all those things. But George Washington, they tell you he didn't really know what to do with slavery, and he was so against the slave. George Washington, who they try to act as ignorant of your culture, but he has an obelisk up, that's a monument, where he made himself Osiris and then put Isis, or who you guys now call Columbia, on top of the Congress building so that she could fly over the city. Nothing was supposed to be built higher than her, so that she would be able to land on top of him and they could copulate and have Herus running around out of the Senate, out of the White House. By the way, the White House that George Washington commissioned to be built, even though he never lived in it, but he commissioned for it to be built. Every president after him that lived in it, guess what? That was a slave plantation. Foggy Bottom, Orange Line, Foggy Bottom, where George Washington University is when you come up the escalator. And you come there, that's where the slaves used to live. Foggy Bottom. At least a majority of them did, in the swamps. That's why, as much as they talk about mosquitoes and everything over in Africa, I've never gone to Africa, and even I've heard, I think, a mosquito once, never seen one. I heard something, and I was so freaked out because it was, they were like, hey, when you go over there, and I don't take I didn't want to take the shots and take the pills and all that stuff they say you got to take. So they try to scare you when you go over there. Like, oh yeah, you gotta take this, you gotta take that, you gotta do this, and make sure you take these pills, and you're gonna get malaria, blah blah. But as soon as I get back and I go to Washington D.C., bit up as soon as I get back, over and over again, because it's swampland. But they would have you believe that in non-swampland, you're gonna get bit all day, every day. But you ain't gonna get bit in swampland here. There's swampland in Florida. Tell me you ain't gonna get bit by mosquitoes in swampland in Florida. You a lie. Right? Tell me you ain't gonna get bit by swampland over in Louisiana. You a lie. Tell me you ain't gonna get bit by mosquitoes in swampland over in Delaware. You a lie. Tell me you ain't gonna get bit in swampland in parts of Texas. You a lie, right? But they want you to believe. I'm not saying there's no mosquitoes or no malaria, but watch this. Even malaria. Are y'all ready for this? And see, people don't want to talk truth. How you doing, Slick Rich? Right? People don't want to talk truth. This is why it becomes difficult. But we gonna be obedient to truth today. We're gonna keep being led in truth. We're gonna keep making sure that we talk about this time code. I know the time is getting short and it's almost time for us to take our leave. But we gonna yeah, there's a whole lot, right? Right? Watch this. You right? You ready? Right? You ready for this? Malaria is not really a problem for us. It's a problem for white folk by colonial construct, social construct. You did you know that? Did you know that? Because you come from the place where it's not a problem. Right? If you were born and raised around it, if you were created to even inhabit that place, if that's the place where civilization, everything starts, it's not really a problem for us when we go over there. So even if I did, I'm not saying you can't get it at all, but you'd be surprised. And by the way, even if you get it, you know what they do over there? If you once again get into the culture, learn the people, love on the people, thank you for the love, appreciate it. You know what happens when you go over there? You're like, oh man, I got bit by a mosquito. They'd be like, oh, you should be fine, but just in case, we'll feed you this, 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 and this. You should be fine. And you just eat right. And I can believe what you're saying about the releasing of it, because all you got to do is peep game. They tell you the truth in movies sometimes. A lot of times, see, you have to agree with the stuff. Sometimes they'll put it in a movie to show you. So, they didn't do it with mosquitoes, but go watch is it Jurassic World Dominion, whatever the last Jurassic Park or Jurassic World movie is, the sixth one. Go watch that one. And when they made up their own locusts to be able to go ahead and eat everything up, they're showing you what they had the ability to do. People thought they were lying to y'all about the Matrix. Now like literally, you could actually. They've been showing commercials where they want people to start sewing into them so that they can start having people have their babies carried in fake wombs. You said sickle cell. So sickle cell basically is just when the cell starts to get elongated, and usually it's because it can't eat certain things and it can't get natural nutrients that it needs or whatever. A lot of times what they do is they say, okay, we'll just keep transfusing blood and giving you somebody else's blood over and over again. And it works temporarily, but it can't really help you, if you don't keep getting your blood siphoned through, or basically sometimes it cleanses it, but a lot of times usually it'll be you're getting somebody else's blood as well. So, but a lot of the best ways to do it is just to deal with things that help with digestion, that are going to help your white blood cells, that are going to just help things as far as energy stuff, like for your mitochondria, eating things like that. So, and especially if you have a baby that's dealing with it, make sure that the mother's milk is going to be better and more enhanced. So any mother who's breastfeeding, if you have a baby, or they say your baby's going to have sickle cell, or they think that your baby has sickle cell or whatever, or they find out, they do the research and find out that the baby has sickle cell, what happens is that the blood, the cells get really messed up. So eventually they can't go through vessels and they can clog because they don't have the same shape. So they'll get warped. But make sure, even as a mother, eat certain things that are for sickle cell, and then make sure whatever you're eating, make sure that you have citrus. Make sure that you have lemon, you have lime, you have grapefruit, things like that. Basically, anything that you can cut. You are what you eat, and whatever you eat, if it looks like you, then it's for that, right? So on a really basic level, like we teach some of that in class and stuff too. But for example, if you cut a lemon in half, right, and you hold the halves up in front of the breast, the lemons will look, or the lines will look like what? Like it'll look like nipples protruding. It'll kind of look like a little areola area. It'll be shaped kind of like the breast on the bosom, right? And then on top of that, when you flip it inside out, if you look at the inside of the breast and the inside of the lemon, the lime, or the grapefruit, etc., the citrus, you'll discover that it also looks like the mammary gland. So if you want to make sure that the milk is going to be even better for the baby as well as what you're eating, have some citrus. So things like that. But there's a lot of different things. But sickle cell is something that they try to say, because people are in evolution and stuff. So they try to say Black people evolved into evolution, or evolved to have this trait or whatever. But here's the interesting part. Once again, if you know how to eat, Africans who have, like, the African diaspora that's over in Africa, it has sickle cell. They don't really die from it. They don't really get blood transfusions like that. Not until recently, and now they're starting to get sick. But not until recently did anybody even, like, think twice about it. When they started taking their blood, they started realizing their blood is sickle cell, but they're not sick because they know how to eat. So even in that, right? But it also shows where you come from. Once again, like, there's the diaspora we've come across, not just through slavery, but also some of us were already coming across before Columbus, just like the book by Dr. Ivan von Sertima, Before Columbus, right? We were already coming back and forth. We already know, right? So if you're talking about sickle cell, you're talking about a lot of this stuff. A lot of stuff, once again, is coming through somebody else's prism, and that's the time code. Can we tell you that really? Can we get you to believe the lie? Can we get you to believe that you are the inferior one? If you believe that you're inferior, then you will allow yourself to be conquered. That's a bar. Let me remind that, Holy Spirit. Thank you. If you will allow, right? If you believe that you are inferior, you will allow yourself to be conquered, right? If you believe that you are inferior, you will allow yourself to be conquered. Now, I'm saying that I'm not a medical advisor. I'm not giving you medical advice. I'm not saying take these 2 things and call me in the morning. I'm just telling you, do some research. But when you do some research, see, at the doctor's office, they're not going to tell you that, even though they're supposed to be practitioners in practice, but they practice on you. You are the test dummy, but they don't really do anything for you. Instant replay, right? So I'm not. So hey, I'm saying that. Look, my wife's a herbalist. If y'all want to go through some stuff with her through her business, she actually has some stuff that she can line up and give you some stuff that's going to be a lot more natural and help you with some of this stuff. I'm not even in the position of her, let alone neither one of us are doctors. So I'm not telling you this specifically is going to heal you exactly this way, but I'm just telling you, do some research. Okay. Right. I'm just telling you, do some research. That's all I'm saying, is do some research. Okay. Because once again, on the time code, it's always coded. They'll tell you what you have, but they'll never tell you how to heal yourself. They'll tell you to read the Bible, but they'll never tell you how to be holy. They'll tell you that you are powerful, but they'll never allow you to have power, right? It's the time code. It's the same thing. You keep seeing the same rhetoric, right? That pharmakia stuff, exactly, right? We talked about that before too. We got a recording about that too. They're going to tell you all these things, but they're not going to tell you how to be your best self. They're going to tell you live your best life, but they're not going to tell you how to eat your best food. They'll tell you do you, but they'll never tell you eat you, because you are what you eat. So they only make money on your illness, not money from them. Exactly, right? So you are what you eat. So if I'm not eating, and not just physically, psychologically. Sake in the Greek means soul. You know that, right? Nachavash, or in Hebrew, right? So nachavash, literally meaning perfect, nailed in place, keeping the community in place. Uh, I'm sorry. Let me say it again. Nachavash, literally meaning perfection, by the characters, meaning perfection. The Holy Spirit doing things to nail the community in place, causing us to stay away from destruction. That's what the soul is in our culture. So what is the soul of us? See, in the time code, they'll give you everything except the soul of the matter, the heart of the matter, the passion of the matter, the seat of the matter. Once again, Psalm 124, verse 4, I believe, Psalm 123, verse 4, Psalm 124, verse 4. It says that there are people who are at ease with you being scorned. They're at ease when you were scorned. So your uneasiness in the timeline has become what people are at ease at. And because we have Stockholm syndrome, we are at ease when we're scorned. We're at ease when you're scorned. That's what a lot of people are. Thank you. Psalm 123, verse 4. People are at ease, and we're at ease when we're scorned ourselves now. Hey man, shoot, when I was coming up, y'all ain't got nothing, man. When we was scoring, when we was whooped, like we got some real whoopings, y'all. Like they used the extension cord. They took the cord, man. Y'all don't know nothing about no whoopings. They took that cord out, and she wouldn't, and it had that big socket on the end, and she boom hit you in the head, and boom hit you in the head. Y'all don't know nothing about no whipping. Oh yeah, well you don't know nothing about whipping. My mama, she used to make me go to the tree out there, and I had to braid it up. Well, you know what? My daddy, he used to take the belt and he used to put it around his fist, and he just punched me. He wouldn't even be hitting you; he'd be punching you. Well, my dad, he wouldn't punch you, but he'd leave that little extra on the end, and he could get that whipping, that inch whipping, right? Like we're at ease with being scorned. It's become your mentality. But now it's time to come out. That belt buckle, all that, right? We can tell you all the stories. I said this one time, I don't even know what happened. I just woke up, right? The whipping Olympics, the whipping Olympics, right? We can tell you all these ways. We say stuff that we don't even realize where it comes from. I'll beat you to the white meat. But you know that's what the slave masters did, because the father of their psychology, the father of modern psychology, he said that black people were crazy and were stupid, and that's why we were black. That's why we were brown. That's why we were darker. He said, so since if you whipped them to the white meat show, it meant you were whipping the purity out. You were going to help the purity to start showing because the white meat was showing. That's why you beat them to the white meat. I mean, it's sick and disgusting when we don't know it, right? You don't realize, why is everybody wearing white gloves? Why do the deacons wear white gloves? Why does the pastor wear white gloves? When it's communion time, why you wear white gloves? Why are you wearing white gloves? Why do the cartoon characters wear white gloves? Well, because when you did offering or you had certain things that you did that were supposed to be in shows, black people were going to be the servants, and white people didn't want to see black hands touching the offering plate, and so you made sure you wore white gloves, and that way they could make sure, oh, okay, good, great, white pure hands are touching it. And you put one hand behind your back. That's why they put one hand behind their back when they guide you to your seat or when they hold the plate, because hey, these black N-words, these N-words, these N-word males and these N-word females, they steal. So put one hand behind their back while they're doing that too. Why do you put your finger up when you leave? And you go like this when you're getting ready to leave. Why? Because the slave master wanted to keep tabs on you. Sometimes the slaves and the slave masters would be in the same place for service. The slaves would basically be on the floor, the slaves would be in the balconies, and the slave masters would be on the floor. Now they have you pay all the money to be in the place the slave masters or the slaves were. But it used to be the opposite. If you were a slave, you were in the balcony and the master was on the floor. And so if you went somewhere and somebody heard somebody walking somewhere, you let them know, I ain't going nowhere, master. Thank you for the love. Appreciate it. I ain't going nowhere. And we're still doing the same thing today. See how wild it is? If you don't know the code, you don't know you're speaking in the code that's actually leading to your demise. And when you don't notice you're speaking code that leads to your demise, you don't know you're living a curse that leads to your demise. But and when you learn how to break the code and decipher it, then you learn how to break the curse and decipher it. See the need for this, right? We got to edify, we got to teach, we have to educate, we got to learn, we got to grow, right? That's why those cartoon characters, by the way, they all wear white gloves. Mickey Mouse, black, white gloves. Minnie Mouse, black, white gloves. Goofy, black,